I'd like to call to order the Louisiana Wildlife and Fishery Commission meeting of May the 4th. We'll lead in the pledge. Mr. Bill, you want to go ahead and do that for us, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now, Susan, roll call, please. Here.
Brandon DeQueer. Andy Brister. Joe McPherson.
Here.
Gene Reynolds. Kevin Sagrera. Alson Sari. Absent. Mr. Chairman, there are 6 commissioners in attendance and we have a quorum. Secretary Shadowin is also present.
All righty. Next, we have approval of May 4th, 2023 agenda, and we need to change a couple of items on that agenda. I guess we're gonna need a vote. We need to move item 11.
Well,
Wait, no.
Mr. Chairman, just as a matter of housekeeping, when the agenda was published, we did not include what is agenda item number 5, which was approval of the special commission meeting minutes where y'all set the shrimp season. So we need to vote unanimously to add that to the agenda.
All right.
That's actually what you've got as agenda item number 5 here. So if you want to kind of skip forward to that,
All right.
unanimous approval to add that to the agenda, and then we can go back to the adoption of today's agenda, if that's all right.
Okay, that's fine. What about you?
Well, when
Don't you have to leave?
Also, as a matter of housekeeping, we have rearranged some of the items as they were published, moving mine, the report on the legislative instruments up to number 7, because we do have Senate Natural Resources downtown
Right.
on adjournment. So those would be the changes that you'd make upon the approval of the agenda.
All right. Well,
Change the agenda as suggested.
all right, we got a first by Joe, second by Brandon. All in favor? You want to do a roll call vote, Miss Susan?
I don't think you need to do a roll
No, we
call
don't.
vote. If there's no objection, it will be unanimous and you can add it to the agenda.
All right, all in favor, state an aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No opposition, the motion passes.
I would move approval of the May 4th agenda as amended.
All right, we got a first, a second by Gene Reynolds. All in favor, state an aye. All right. Okay. Any opposition? No opposition, motion passes. All right, moving on, we have commission special announcement and,
Number 5.
oh, I'm sorry, we got the adoption of the April 6, 2023 commission meetings minutes and the April 19th special commission meeting minutes. So we need a motion to approve the minutes.
So
Anybody?
moved.
Who's that?
Kevin.
Okay, got Kevin
Second.
with a first, second by Joe. All in favor, state an aye. Aye. Any opposition? No opposition. Motion passes. All right, moving on to item 6, commission special announcements and personal privileges. And I got Secretary Shanahan wants to speak. Shannon.
Good morning, commissioners, and good morning all in attendance. I'm Rob Shadowin, and when he said Secretary Shadowin in attendance, or Susan did, that sounds so odd. So there have been some changes in my life since the last time we all got together as a board. But I guess I want to tell y'all that the most significant thing that has not changed is the dedication, the passion, and the work of all these men and women that work at the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. That has not changed. They are focused on the mission to preserve, conserve, and protect our natural resources. In fact, I've told many of them, I am so humbled and honored to be able to serve in this position because these folks and hundreds of them around the state are going to make me look a whole lot better than I am. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity, even though, as I told the governor, I would have given anything had the circumstances been different. And I want to continue some of the same things that the former Secretary Jack Montesey had started, because he had done so many good things for this department. And I would ask that you keep him and Sandra in your continued prayers. And I would ask for your prayers also, as well as for the men and women of this department. So I stand before you extremely honored to be able to serve. And I thank y'all very much for your support, the well wishes I've heard from every one of you. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much those verbal pats on the back mean. And that's all I have, unless y'all have any questions. Okay. Thank you much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert. You just keep doing what you're doing and everybody will be fine. You're welcome.
There's nothing else.
No. You want to speak? there,
Yeah.
Mr. Jones?
I just wanted to point out that, we've got Colonel Abear in attendance today. He's trying to fulfill his obligation, to the department, and, I just want to, take this opportunity, and that from what I understand, it may be our last opportunity to compliment you on the great job that you did in not only your whole career, and in visiting with you, there were some things about you that I'm not going to repeat, but I was surprised to find out. You've had a tremendous run and was able to achieve the colonel's position, which is a real tribute for those accomplishments and your service to the department. But I just wanted to thank you and the commission as a whole does for your service and for everything that you've contributed to wildlife and fisheries in Louisiana. Thank you very much, Colonel.
Right. Thank you, Chad. Any other, anybody else wants to speak? All right. With that, we'll go on to the next line item to receive a report on the 2023 regular legislative session. Cole Garrett.
All right, good morning, Mr. Chairman and commissioners. I appreciate your indulgence to move me to the front of the line here. We do have Senate Natural Resources coming up upon adjournment, and I will need to be downtown for that. So thank you for moving me to the front of the line, even though Miss Susan refuses to ever put me at the front. So here we are again. I presented to y'all last month. The presentation is going to be very similar. Essentially what this is going to be is kind of a tracking of the bills that I presented to you all. Just a reminder that June 8th is when the legislative session adjourns. So we're kind of at the halfway point here. So keep that in mind as I'm presenting bills, where they are in the process, and I'll kind of give you what my inclination is on where these bills may end up. With that, I'll jump right into it. The first one deals with kind of general commission and boards bills, as well as licensing bills. House Bill 221 is the first one. That would be a restriction on rulemaking. And basically it says if you promulgate a rule, you have to find 2 rules to remove. It's pretty arbitrary what those may be, whether the rules are good or not. You all took action last time to oppose this bill. It has not yet been heard in committee. If it doesn't get heard here in the next week or so, I think they're going to be pressed for time to get it across the aisle and through everything. So we are still tracking it, but it has not been set on a committee agenda yet. The second one you have is the removal for the mandate to issue LAZ whole ID numbers. Y'all are very familiar with this. Y'all have taken both emergency action and a notice of intent to establish a shallow water vessel exemption through July of 2024, and also to get into the Coast Guard standards. This bill will align the state law with the current federal regulations. That did pass through the House Natural Resources Committee last week. It is now pending debate on the House floor. Senate Bill 119 is actually in front of the Senate Natural Resources Committee today. This is another bill that you all took a position on in opposition. As you'll recall, the youth license was established as part of our license restructure in 2021. It only pertains to those youth who are hunting deer or turkey, i.e. they're getting tags from this agency. It is a $5 annual license. It also serves as that youth lottery application to do any youth lottery hunts on our WMAs. Previously, that was a $5 charge per application. So there's a lot of good benefits here, and I will tell you that the direct amount of money that we receive from these licenses from users is about $100,000 a year, but we pull down $700,000 to $750,000 in federal money from Pittman Robertson money. And obviously, if this goes away, we would not be receiving that money. Or recall, these are allocations of excise taxes on guns and ammo. They're distributed amongst the states based on the number of licensed hunters. So if we were to lose this money, you'd have money that are being paid by taxpayers in Louisiana go to other states for their habitat and conservation.
So last time, if you would, let us know the authors of these bills.
Absolutely.
As you go through it.
Yes, sir.
And one of the things that if this was repealed, right now there's a, am I saying it right? There's an 850% return on their investment for these youth licenses.
Well, we're in dangerous waters here because you're asking a lawyer to do math, but if you say it's 850%, it sounds right. Yeah, it's a very good return on investment based on the amount of federal match we get on the somewhat minimal $5 fee. The other thing I'll add is we did a fiscal note on this bill based on the number of youth hunters that we had getting deer and turkey tags. And that fiscal note ended up being spot on. And what that tells us is this $5 is not an impediment to anybody who wants to go hunting, because obviously the youth hunters and outdoors folks are the ones who are going to continue to have this agency work, and we do not want to keep anybody out. We do not want to be an impediment to these activities, and that number tells us that this is not.
5 shotgun shells cost the $5 now.
Yeah, no doubt.
Who's
So
the author?
this is Senator Stuart Cathy is the author on this one. Kenny Cox is handling the LAZ numbers, and Mark Wright, Representative Wright, is HB 221. The final one on this page is Senator Sharon Hewitt. This is electronic meetings for boards and commissions. This did pass the committee and has gotten through the Senate and is now on the House side scheduled for committee hearing. There are a number of amendments that went in committee. I wasn't able to track all of them, but I don't think it changed kind of the spirit of the bill, which is boards such as yourselves could be able to hold some portion of your meetings electronically, whether or not there's a declaration of emergency in place, which is the current standard, if you'll recall from COVID. Moving to the wildlife bills, now Representative Reiser had a bill to pay the judgment for the Crooks case. This is the Catahoula Basin mineral royalties issue. This does not have a direct effect on wildlife and fisheries or our coffers, but it does take money out of the state general fund from mineral royalties that were derived through the Department of Natural Resources. It has not yet been heard in House Appropriations. Granted, House Appropriations has been dealing with all the budget bills, so I think they may turn their attention to some of these more specific instruments now that they're actually voting on budget bills today on the floor. House Bill 465, this is an exempts Livingston Parish from the Scenic Rivers Act. This was Representative Hodges It was voluntarily deferred in committee. We testified on this bill. Essentially, there are many ways to remove rivers or portion of rivers out of the Scenic Rivers Act if they so choose, instead of just blanketly exempting an entire parish. The committee was kind of frustrated with the testimony they heard from the proponents of this because they brought pictures of dilapidated houses that had fallen in and refrigerators and ovens and stuff that were along there. And there's of course nothing in the Scenic Rivers Act that prevents the parish or any of their contractors from removing those items. And so there was some frustration expressed by the chairman in that regard. So that bill was voluntarily deferred. I do not expect to see it up again. And we are working with the parish and assisting them in ways that they can do what they need to do on these scenic rivers to protect their communities from floods and other things. So we're working with the parish on that, despite this bill not being moved through the process. House Bill 570 was another bill that you all took opposition to. It was also voluntarily deferred. This was the feral hog tail bounty. We've seen this in other states, other jurisdictions. It has not been proven to be effective. Commissioner Strain actually came to the table and talked about some of the alternative methods to control feral hogs, including the sodium nitrite that Dr. LaCour had presented to you all a few meetings ago. And the author agreed that there's probably some more productive ways to spend money and do research than to pay people for tails. So that was voluntarily deferred. I don't expect it to come back up. Then we have two resolutions. The first one is concurrent resolution 3 by Representative Boyer. This is a deals with self-clearing permits on refuges, Rockefeller and Marsh Island specifically. These are some refuges where you don't have the whole suite of activities that you would find in a WMA. There was some frustration from people who utilized those who weren't used to dealing with self-clearing permits. And as a result, a group of legislators had made it a point to go in and remove the requirement for these on those particular refuges. I will point out they got with the department on the front end, and this was kind of a negotiated resolution on it. House Resolution 85 by Representative Mincy is an urgent request for us to research, evaluate, and make recommendations relative to the use of dogs for deer hunting on Maurepas Swamp WMA. It was heard yesterday in a long day of Maurepas related bills. I'll get into those later. Again, it's an urgent request. We're going to do the research and evaluate it. It does not mandate that you all take any particular action or the department, but it does ask that we look into it. So to the Maurepas issues, these are the carbon capture bills. I apologize that the print is so small. I'll blame the legislature for filing so many bills on this particular issue and maybe being too lazy to make 2 pages out of it. But several of these bills were heard yesterday in House Natural Resources. I will deal with the ones that were, so I will jump down to House Bill 120, which is the third one down there on your left side. This is by Representative Muscarello. It will prohibit the permitting of any above surface wells in Lake Maurepas and Lake Pontchartrain. And it did pass. It passed without opposition, so it has been reported favorably. One thing that I'll point out, there is currently 2 operating agreements on Maurepas Swamp and one in Lake Maurepas. And if they're unable to put injection wells, monitoring wells, any other above surface facilities in the lake itself, there's a potential that it drives those to our property. And then we have to deal with Habitat doing mitigation for anything that occurs, replacing property that has been damaged as a result of this. So it's hard to say. I mean, this possibly could kill that project as well. There may be no wells at all, but anyhow, it did pass without opposition. The second bill that made it through the committee is House Bill 267. This is a moratorium, a 10-year moratorium on carbon storage and sequestration projects on Lake Maurepas, as well as specifically our WMA. Again, we have two operating agreements on the WMA. I think it was testified to that they're expecting to do injection by the fourth quarter of 2025. So obviously a 10-year moratorium would definitely drag that timeline significantly out. I don't know the economics of it. I don't make the decisions on whether this halts, stops, or just delays the projects, but it did pass. The vote was 9-5. These were all very contentious issues. Even the one that got through without objection had a lot of testimony on it. House Bill 308 was, I'm sorry, I didn't mention that. That was Representative Wheat on that one. He also brought House Bill 308, which would require an environmental impact statement for any permitting to do carbon storage within Maurepas Swamp or the WMA. This ended up in a tie vote at the committee side, which essentially is as if it was not heard. And so no action was taken. I've got it in red there because I think even though no action was taken, it's still a viable instrument. I don't believe it will be coming back up. There was 3 Robbie Carter bills that were not heard, but they are scheduled for next week. That is House Bill 10 to remove eminent domain authority by private industries, House Bill 35, which would prohibit projects in St. Helena Parish for carbon storage, and also House Bill 312, which removes limitation of liability for damage as a result of carbon storage. So none of those were heard yesterday, but they will be on the agenda for the next House Natural Resources Committee. Sherman Mack had 2 bills, House Bill 453, which would limit carbon storage injection to the Gulf of Mexico. Y'all have previously taken opposition to that bill. One, it would prevent us from doing any of this activity on the 1.5 million acres that Wildlife and Fisheries and the Commission owns, and would take that bundle of rights away from us as landowners. But it also would require, if you were going to be able to do this, to have long pipelines through habitat and potentially damage a lot more habitat than actually injecting at or near a site. That was involuntarily deferred, so it is dead. House Bill 454 would require parish approval of any carbon storage. The discussion on this was kind of, hey, this is a state managed program. The state has plenary authority over this, and it was also involuntarily deferred. Speaker Shakespeare had a very robust bill dealing with all kinds of carbon storage and sequestration. It does affect our seismic regulation authority. It requires additional notice. Keep in mind that you all did a notice of intent a few months ago to require these very things. So y'all were proactive on it. We recognize some of the ways that we could improve the process, and we've already taken action that will now be codified into the law. So this is of no particular concern to this agency, and we actually welcome that codification to make sure that public input is part of this process. Yes, sir.
On carbon capture sequestration bills, so there's still 2 that exist that could actually slow or compromise the project as it exists?
House Bill 120, as well as House Bill 267. So the prohibition on above ground platforms in the lake itself, as well as the 10-year moratorium, definitely, it was testified to yesterday that those could and will compromise the Air Products project. So again, I don't speak on behalf of Air Products, but that's what was testified to in committee. And then additionally, the 3 Robbie Carter bills that I mentioned are still viable and scheduled for a hearing next week. For the fisheries bills, House Bill 161 creates tax exemptions for commercial fishermen and processors. This passed the House and is now on the Senate side. It looks like it will be moving through the process. House Bill 255 by Mandy Landry is a tax credit for oyster shell recycling. This is something that CRCL does in conjunction with our agency. It was heard in committee, but it wasn't acted upon. It was kind of just a in globo discussion of various tax credits. So I'm not sure when it will be back up for an actual vote. House Bill 438 by Representative Bob Owen. This is dealing with the public oyster sea ground gear licenses. The license was previously a gear license. They're changing it to a permit. The purpose is so you can, a vessel owner can have whatever captain he wants on his vessel, so long as he holds this license. That's how it always was. We bifurcated two licenses in the past, and this was kind of an unintended consequence. So this is a cleanup bill in that regard. There were two different shrimp and crawfish labeling penalty bills. Both of them you had taken a vote to support. The first one is by Representative Cormier, which would authorize Wildlife and Fisheries to enforce in the restaurants this mandate to label whether you've got imported crawfish or shrimp. This was voluntarily deferred after a wide discussion in House Natural Resources Committee. I will say it looks like the Restaurant Association had come out in opposition of it. So maybe the discussion brought some more attention to the issue, but it will not, the bill will not be moving forward. And then the other one was actually withdrawn from the House records. That was the one that was originally by Tim Kerner, House Bill 600. And so the final bill here is House Bill 567. This was the Menhaden exclusion zone and establishment of the quota. The last time I presented this to you, this is again lawyer math. I had in my thing that it was the quota was 266 million metric tons. That was false. I messed up my zeros. It is 266,000 metric tons would be the quota. And I also wanted to make sure that we said, I think y'all had asked last meeting, what was the landings out of Louisiana territorial waters? And I believe we may have provided you with the Gulf-wide landings. So I wanted to tell you that from territorial waters in Louisiana, current an average landings is 220,000 metric tons. So this is actually below what this quota would set it at 266. The other thing it does is take what y'all have established through commission action for a exclusion area and kind of bump it out to a half mile as opposed to a quarter mile in general. And then during certain breeding seasons, it would actually extend it even further to 1 to 3 miles, depending on where you are on the coast. This bill has not been scheduled for a hearing. I did not see it for next week's agenda either. I do not know what the author or the chairman intend to do with it, but I will say, as I mentioned, we're kind of running into a time crunch if this isn't heard relatively soon. And that was Representative Orgeron, Commissioner McPherson, if I didn't mention that. Fisheries bills continued. These are the Senate bills. Senate Bill 90 is actually on the agenda for this morning's meeting in Senate Natural Resources. This is commercial use of surface water. It would basically say if you're taking surface water for commercial activity, you need to pay fair market value for it. It is a resource of the state. To not pay fair market value for it would be an unconstitutional donation from the state to the user. I think that is a correct interpretation. The Attorney General has also come down and said, yes, this is, even though this is as of now a voluntary program, these individuals should be paying. We are also a beneficiary of this bill because the proceeds of this would go to the Aquatic Plant Control Fund and, and we would be able to utilize that to address giant salvinia, water hyacinth, invasive species, et cetera. So we will be testifying on that bill today in committee.
Chairman Blanchard, I have a question. Is there
if I recall, there's an ag exemption in that if it would pass.
It's not just an ag exemption. There is a riparian landowner exemption for agricultural uses, industrial uses. So, all these, plants up and down the rivers, they would be able to use the river water. They would not have to be paying for it because they would have the riparian rights to use them. I don't think that that's a well understood exemption. I think that's been this is the second year in a row this bill has come. And I believe that was probably a reason it was defeated last year, was just, there's not a clear understanding of what those allowances are. Senate Bill 99, this would be a red snapper possession limit in state waters. This is targeted to those folks that have camps that are only accessible by water. The legislature has done something similar for trout and redfish in the past. We were contacted by the feds through NOAA NIMS, and they said, hey, the delegation of authority to set state seasons and limits does not extend to possession limits. And so please let the author know that this would only apply to fish caught in state waters, which of course is an enforcement nightmare to figure out where red snapper have come from. So we expressed that to the author. He did voluntarily defer the bill. So I don't expect that to move. Senate Bill 133 just provides for the menhaden fishery. This is clearly a placeholder bill. It was by Representative Henskins, who is the chairman of Senate Natural Resources. It has not been scheduled. And then Senate Bill 161 by Representative Lambert. This is the Small Wild Catfish Processors Act. It essentially allows for these processors who sell less than 400 pounds of catfish a month to kind of get out from under some of the DHH standards. There's some other bakers and kind of home chef kind of exemptions, and this kind of follows in that. I do recall that even though he's not here, Commissioner Sunseri had some concerns about this being applied to wholesale retail dealers and them not having to play by the same rules as others just because they don't process very much. The author did amend the bill to only deal with those people who have commercial fishermen who sell directly to the public. So it would not include wholesale retail dealers who are in the supply chain. And finally, enforcement bills. I know that you all got an email from an individual dealing regarding House Bill 4. This is criminal trespass on the running waters of the state. Essentially, it says that criminal trespass shall not apply to a person who is operating a vessel on the running waters of the state. As you all know, we have a lot of coastal WMAs that have navigable waters running through them. The concern expressed by the gentleman who reached out to you was this is going to kind of overturn the jurisprudence of private canals in private property, but also it may have an impact for the property that we own and manage as well. I think that's to be determined. We certainly, as the state, as a governing authority, have some ability to regulate even public things. I mean, you think about you can drive on the highway, that's a public thing, but you need to have a registered car and a license. You can't camp on beaches after night. There are governmental interest in regulation, even on public things. So I'm not convinced that this is going to have the impact to our agency and to our WMAs, but it certainly does open the door for those challenges. I will say that. That was Representative Bacala. It has not been scheduled. It's referred to House Administrative on Criminal Justice. But I do expect this one to get a hearing. I have talked to the author, and it is something that I expect him to try to move. House Bill 59, this is operation of personal watercrafts at night, so long as they are equipped with Coast Guard lighting. There are many states that do allow this, or I should say do not prohibit this. Obviously, personal watercrafts, Sea-Doos, and wave runners have come a long way from the stand-up jet skis when they were initially introduced. But as an enforcement agency over public safety on the water, we do have some concerns. We don't have data that suggests that this will be more dangerous, but these are highly maneuverable vehicles. They can go very fast. So there is some, with any vessel operating at night, there are some concerns. So we provided that testimony. It did pass through, it was reported favorably through the committee, and it will be going to a vote on the House floor. House Bill 207, this was by Representative Shammerhorn. This would prohibit minors from swimming in any body of water where there is a hydroelectric dam. There was a lot of questions about it during its hearing, and it was voluntarily deferred. I think one of the problems might be that it didn't give geographical limitations with the dam. So the entire Sabine River, all of Toledo Bend would have applied. And I think that along with the criminal penalties that were associated with it just were a little much for the committee. House Bill 297 increases the prescriptive period for litter violations. Previously, for any criminal charge where there is not jail time, you have 6 months to bring a prosecution. The way that we do litter violations, we set up cameras. We check those cameras from time to time. Then we have to review all the film. We then have to go find out who these people are that are going to these dump sites. And it's a time-intensive investigation. So we were often bumping up against this 6-month time period. So as a result, the legislature seeking to move it to a 2-year period, give us a little more time to conduct those investigations. And that did move favorably through the House Natural Resources Committee. House Bill 299, I mentioned to you last time, this would be a prohibition on enforcing certain federal firearms laws. As we are federally commissioned agents, that kind of puts us in a very awkward position to uphold certain federal laws, but not others. This bill has not been scheduled for hearing yet. I don't know if it will be. There was a similar bill last year that did not go anywhere, but remains to be seen. House Bill 543 requires a uniform policy for vehicular pursuits, and it also provides for strict liability for an agency in the event that there's injury, fatality, whatever. I will say that we have been proactive. The Enforcement Division has come up with a new vehicular pursuit policy. I think that it very similarly matches what is being sought out of this bill. So that part is not of concern for us. Obviously, when you have strict liability to an agency, that is a potential concern. And I know that this bill was on House Civil Law's agenda this past week, and the author deferred it. I don't know if he intends to move forward with it or not, but he at least was not prepared to do it for that meeting. The final one is House Bill 563. This is the Law Enforcement Recruitment and Incentive Fund. That's only on here to tell you that we are not on there. It deals with sheriffs, municipal police, and state police. It has already passed the House and has moved over to the Senate side. I don't know that there is much of a chance that we get included in it, but it's there. The final thing I'll say is, yes, sir.
Yeah, that's good.
I assume that we asked to be amended in the bill by someone, huh?
I'll defer that to the Colonel. I think he was having conversations.
Yes, sir, Mr. McPherson, we did ask to get amended onto that bill. We were told that we were gonna be amended onto that bill in the House. Sounds like we were not. So we're gonna pursue on the Senate side to try to get amended to get on that bill.
So it didn't come up publicly then, huh? It wasn't discussed, there wasn't an amendment offered?
Not to my knowledge, no, sir.
I had a conflicting hearing that same day, so I wasn't able to be in that committee.
Okay. We sure need to monitor that. I mean, it'd be kind of foolish that the other agencies would have the benefit of that and y'all wouldn't.
Yes, sir, we are definitely monitoring.
All right, thank you.
So the final thing I'll say, I don't have a slide on it, but you do recall the issues we have with White Lake and the fact that we had put in a $38 million request to bolster the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, as well as the North Shore of White Lake itself, which is the southern boundary of our property. That got put into the original funds bill through the governor's office request. It did get taken out in Appropriations Committee. The House will be taking up the budget bills today on the floor. I don't anticipate it being put back in on the House side. We're already in discussions with the Senate on how we can get those put back in. Y'all have done a resolution talking about the importance of these projects and the importance of White Lake. And we will do everything we can to get those put back in on the Senate side.
Could you identify where the money went to, where they moved the money to?
No, sir, I can't. It went back into the pot.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, I have one more question. Cool. Going back to HB4. So I have a concern with, I don't know if anyone else does, but if you're pulling, you can't have any criminal trespass on water. If you have someone who's going in private areas, that's a concern. And I don't know how enforcement feels about that, but it's just an issue that I have a little bit of concern.
I'll certainly allow the colonel to talk on this if he wants, but I can tell you just as a general matter, wildlife and fisheries agents have not done specific trespass enforcement. We will do trespass enforcement if it's, as part of another wildlife violation. So it's kind of an issue for the sheriffs and local police to enforce. But how you define the running waters of the state is I'm sure a conversation that will be had in committee. Colonel, do you have anything to add?
No, Cole, that's exactly right. We generally defer strictly trespassing charges to the local sheriff's offices.
Okay, so it's done local. Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right, thank you.
Could I follow up, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
go ahead.
Colonel, did Cole state that properly, that y'all do right criminal trespass if it's with some other charge?
Yes, sir. If it's in conjunction with a wildlife investigation, we do. We don't do it very often because most of the time, whenever that investigation is going on and we know there's trespassing involved, we just call the local authorities to handle the trespassing. But once in a while, we will charge that.
Why would that? I mean, it makes no sense. And I know of a case that's not too old where you're out there, you catch the fella, you write him on other charges, but then you call the deputy sheriff to come meet you. You're waiting. You're inconveniencing the sheriff's department, who probably has other things they could be doing, to write the criminal trespass charge. What sense does that make?
So if it's a time sensitive thing, like I said, if there are wildlife charges involved, we will occasionally do that. But generally and speaking, in general, we like to let the local authorities handle that. We will, but again.
I'll tell you the problem with that. The local authorities don't want to touch it.
Correct.
So we really need to consider that, and you're in a great position because you can divert to Colonel Z, and I'm looking at the secretary too. But why would that be our policy when we know that the DA don't want to touch it because it's a hot potato? The sheriff don't want to touch it because it's a hot potato. That's his people that's going to vote for him. You weren't elected, you were appointed, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. So you don't have to worry about the electors in your position. So I would really like to see that discussed, and I'd like to have feedback why we shouldn't be writing criminal trespass as part of another violation. If we're out there in the middle of the night and the night hunter's there and we're writing tickets, why don't we just write that one too? And why we want to call the sheriff's department for it?
We can definitely have those discussions.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, Gene.
On this budget issue today, where they took the money out, do we have anybody on the House floor today that's willing to put it back in? since the budget's,
My understanding is that it will likely not be put back in on the House side. There's a number of reasons for that. I think they're trying to save some money for the Senate to put on once it goes across the hallway. So I don't think they're trying to encumber the entire, up to the entire cap. But that's my understanding is probably not going to be put back on the House
well,
side.
if they're doing the budget today in the House, that's usually the time you add it, or who took it out?
It got taken out in House Appropriations. It would have been part of an Globo amendment. So I guess the committee
Okay.
chairman Zarang, maybe, but, we've had discussions with him. I don't think that, I'm confident he is not opposed to it.
Okay,
But
okay. Just wondering, usually that goes back and forth on budget day where we can,
yes, sir. The information I got is we would be best suited to concentrate on trying to get it back on the Senate side.
probably so. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Kevin, you have something? Anybody else has anything for Cole? All right,
Thank you again for letting me jump to the top of the agenda. I appreciate it. And
Brian, you,
Sorry, I interrupt. I know Cole's in a hurry. I do realize that we've taken a position on most of these bills, but we have added HR 85, which is a House resolution that the commission has not taken any action if they for, against, or neutral.
So again, to refresh everyone's memory, this is a House resolution, so it's not a concurrent resolution. It only starts and stays on the one side. Let me pull my presentation
That's
back.
a deer hunting?
That's the deer dog hunting, yes, sir, and Marapaw Swamp. And it is an urgent request. It's the bottom one here. It's an urgent request for us to research, evaluate, and make recommendations relative to the use of dog hunting on Marapaw Swamp. And I'll allow Assistant Secretary Myers to give you the take on it.
I was just going to mention there was a new House resolution that was introduced that was not on your screen that I just found out about too, is in relative to that would impact the department, but we've already got it covered in terms of there's a House resolution that is asking the state agencies to consider using native plants in their greenery around their state agencies. So we already got it covered. So I guess, from my perspective, but that was passed, I think out of the committee yesterday that I just got notice of it when I was just sitting there. So just want to put that out there. I think it's HR 68.
So again, as all of these things, I bring y'all the bills that I think may potentially impact us one way or the other. It's up to you. If you want to take a position on it. Again, this is a resolution, doesn't change law, doesn't mandate y'all take any action. It's an urgent request, but.
Brandon,
On HR 85, are we needing to take a position at this time? It looks like it just says to urge us to research and adopt the recommendation. Are you wanting us to take a position?
Again, I was just pointing out that we have not, it is an urgent request. We're going to, once it's signed into effect, we will start looking at that request.
I think he just wanted to let you know this was an addition from last month where y'all did take action on it in case you wanted to.
anything, Joe?
Very good. Thank you again.
All right. No further questions. Thank you, Cole, for informing us on all that. All right, next we have Major Skinner that wants to give us an enforcement report.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. For the month of April, we had 6 voting incidents, 3 injuries, no fatalities, 535 written warnings, 535 written citations, 451 written warnings, and 18 public assists. Here's a brief synopsis of some cases that were made last month. A Homer man was cited in Claiborne Parish for hunting turkeys over a baited area, possession of illegally taken turkey, and failing to tag a turkey. Agents were on patrol when they found the subject actively hunting turkeys near Athens, and he was in possession of a freshly harvested turkey. The agents found corn spread on the ground where the subject was hunting, and that he was previously cited for hunting turkeys over a baited area in 2022. That turkey and his shotgun were seized. Subject faces civil restitution totaling $1,539 for the replacement value of that illegally taken turkey. Enforcement agents cited 4 subjects in St. Mary Parish for taking oysters from state grounds during a closed season and using an illegal dredge. Agents were on patrol when they received a complaint about people illegally harvesting oysters near Point of Fair Island. When agents arrived, the 2 vessels had just finished harvesting with oversized dredges in the closed area, with one vessel possessing 28 sacks and the other 33. All of those oysters were seized and returned to the water. 2 Bell Chase men were cited for gross litter violations in Plaquemine Parish doing routine wildlife patrols. Agents located an illegal dump site on Walker Road and discovered 2 stripped-down personal watercraft. Through investigation and evidence collected at the scene, agents were able to identify the subject that was responsible. Agents returned to Walker Road at a later date and discovered more litter had been illegally dumped. Again, agents were able to identify the subject responsible for dumping construction debris, home appliances, and household trash. In addition to the criminal fines and possible incarceration, both of those subjects will be required to perform 16 hours of community service in a litter abatement program. This concludes the report, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? Thank you, Major Scanlon. All right. Now we have Mr. Tommy Tuma, biologist. He's gonna give us the recommendations and approval minutes on notice of intents for wild quadrupeds, wild birds. Tommy, you go ahead. I know it's.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. While not as exciting as the report that Cole did on the legislative summary, I'll try to keep it interesting. But I'm here to talk about, or hopefully we can close out this process that we've been in for 4 months as of today. And it's been a magical experience for me, and I hope it has been for you. And we'll talk about what we did through this rulemaking process. So in January, I presented you with a notice of intent. And during that time, since that time, we have collected public comment on that conditionally approved hunting season. And you can see there were 71 comments related to the proposed changes, and I had 69 from emails, 1 phone call, 1 Zoom, and that came from 53 different individuals. So obviously, individuals can make more than 1 comment. So we had 71 comments. And then just general hunting season regulation comments that were not proposed, we actually had none. Generally, we have, if somebody wants to change this deer area, they want this regulation established. That's not what we proposed, but this year we actually didn't have any comments. So it was a pretty light year for the most part. So if you look at the summary, the 2 things that gathered the most public comment were the early teal season proposal, and I'm sorry it's so small, but I tried to fit them all on 1 page, and then the West Zone waterfowl dates. 13 and 12 respectively. Everything else was pretty light. And that's the summary of all the comments. I won't go down through them, but that's the summary of all the comments that I received. And then in March, we presented you with some potpourri amendments. And those amendments were changes to the deer tagging regulations and the turkey tagging regulations. If you've remembered, it's just cleaning up some language that the deer tags and the turkey tags can only be used by the person that is issued to. There were some reports of, a guy or mom or dad or father or mom using their kids' tags that they were issued. And I don't even know why we have this conversation, but we have to kind of clarify that certainly was never the intent of that turkey regulation. So 2 different amendments there, 1 for turkeys or 1 for deer. And since it's in a different section in Title 76, 1 for turkeys. We also, the commission brought forth, those 2 came from the department. The commission brought forth an amendment to the West Zone dates. And so with that change with the West Zone dates, we also changed the light geese season. And I didn't put the conservation order, but we did change the conservation order as they all depend on one another, and we try to sync those up. So we published that in the potpourri, in the register in March. We held an administrative public hearing on April the 20th here in this room, at 10 a.m. We had no persons attending that meeting and we had no comments. But since that time, from that April 6th meeting where we adopted these amendments in the potpourri, we have received 126 comments related to the proposed amendments from 83 different individuals. So obviously there was 43 people made 2 comments is what it breaks down to. And the 2 comments they made was the West Lawn waterfowl season and the Youth Veterans Waterfowl Weekend. So the West Lawn waterfowl season, 74 people were opposed, and I'm sorry I didn't put this. So that's total, and that's number that supported the amendments, and that's number that opposed the amendments. So 74 people were opposed to the amended dates. 9 people were in support of the amendment dates, and so for a total of 83 comments. And then 43 people were in favor of separating the youth and veterans waterfowl weekends, having the youth weekend on the front and having the veterans weekend on the back. They wanted to separate those weekends. And so that, and you can do that because that's not part of the 60-day framework. And with that, I will take any questions. Now, I will remind you that we need to take action today. So I would ask for, I guess, 3 separate votes to approve the deer tags, approve the turkey tags, and then approve or yay or nay on the deer tags, yay or nay on the turkey tags, and then yay or nay on the amendments. If you vote yay, then it is included in the notice of intent, and then at that time, we'll take a vote on that notice of intent. If you vote nay, then it will revert back to the original proposal that we had. And so then we'll take a vote on that proposal as I understand it. I hope I'm explaining this correctly. So, and we would ask you to take action because we're kind of in some uncharted territory. We have to have the Fish and Wildlife Service, our waterfowl dates by the end of April because they have a rulemaking process to go through also. So any delay in this time frame would put us behind. And I'm also in the second edits of the hunting pamphlet. So things are trucking along and we just need to be in a timely manner. So with that, I hope I didn't stumble on anything, and I'll entertain any questions if you have any.
Tommy, I'll ask, I've been bombarded with questions about the dates on the waterfowl duck hunting season. And, in our area, which is the Terrebonne Parish area, I guess should be, east of the Atchafalaya River, has been just bombarded, with opposition to the amendment that we have done, the last time we met, on the, I guess, the potpourri, amendment. And they'd like for, us to vote on, to go back to the original amendment that they had. And saying that, I know that, one group, the By the Large Hunting Club, which is 300 members, I think they contacted you on that. They'd like to see, the dates go back, right there to the original date, with, I apologize from the last time we did the potpourri, when we did it, because I think a lot of us didn't have the dates in the calendar in front of us in order to see exactly, when that was happening, but on the eastern part of the state, which is called the Western Zone right now, or Coastal Zone, the big ducks don't show up till the end of the season. And, if it was up to that particular part of the state, they would much prefer as late as they can get it, for the ducks. And I understand the ducks on the eastern part of on the western part of the state get there earlier, right there. So there's a big controversy, on, and I've heard where we should have went back to where the Atchafalaya River was the east and the west, right there. And, it's just a big old commotion, that's going on with the duck hunters right there.
And certainly we had that framework when we had 3 zones in the 2 splits, but I'm not going to say overwhelmingly, but it certainly was favored to have in the coastal zone and the west zone at that time, which is not the MAV basically. There were hunters who wanted earlier seasons and hunters who wanted later seasons, and going with the the two zones and the three segments allowed us to have an earlier season and a later season in the same framework, which is, I think I told you that in March, we proposed, that's why we proposed that, or that's why the commission at that time voted that to have that, the structure that we have right now. And we understand, and I think Jason's here and he can talk a lot better about waterfowl than me, but we understand the dynamics of having, Northwest piney wood habitats that have inland reservoirs and coastal habitats all in the same zone. It's a lot different. Those people want different things. And then we're even seeing the, Vermilion West is wanting different than Vermilion East. So it certainly makes your job more difficult, but that's just where we're at right now.
You don't have a slide showing where the original dates were from?
I do not. I'm sorry. I didn't come prepared for that.
All right.
I would tell you that your public comments that you have in front of you, that would be, I think it's in your packet because I provided that to you. It would basically be longer splits and later season. And now we have shorter splits, and earlier season closure. And the second segment, I think, starts on a Monday instead of a weekend. So that's the
Right.
difference. Yeah, so the original dates would be the first segment, November 11th through December the 3rd, and then we would split, and we'd start up the second split December 16th, and that would run through January the 2nd, and then we would be off until January the 13th, and that would run, the remainder of the season would go till January the 31st.
That's the original.
That's the original date,
So
yes,
the-
sir.
And what we with right now?
So I'll put it on. Oops. So there's what is proposed now, November 11th to December 3rd. And then that December 11th starts on a Monday. You've seen the comments of people not preferring the Monday opening. So December 11th to January the 7th, and then January 13th through January the 21st.
All right. Also, the youth weekend, the veterans wanted it separate. And what was proposed to me was November the 4th through November the 5th was youth only.
Right.
Season, and the veterans suggested February the 3rd to February the 4th for veteran season. And on the new one, it would both be together, right?
Yes, and that's where we're talking about. We would ask you not to make any further changes because that's going to delay this rulemaking process. So you vote the amendment in as it was voted in, or you say nay and it goes back to the original proposal, or we start this rulemaking process and timeline all over again. We could do it that way, I guess, and I'll let Secretary Myers or Assistant Secretary Myers talk about it. We would have to set the season probably through declaration of emergency, but that lasts 180 days. We'll be right back in this rulemaking process again next year to do that again. Certainly, if, the commission wants us to separate the youth and veterans weekends, we can look at that and propose it for the next season. But this season, we would kind of prefer to either we would prefer to take the amendment as it was conditionally adopted, or vote no on the amendment and go back to the original proposal, which would be the youth and veterans weekend together.
Okay.
Yes,
The original proposal would be that, right?
correct. And those, in the youth and veterans weekends would still be together.
Right.
And the reason we do that is because there's more reliable water in the west zone than the east zone. So we have that before the weekend. As we talked about the reservoirs and the coastal habitats that are generally have more water, the east zone, you're talking about the bottomland hardwood systems. If we're in a drought, they don't have any water. They don't have any habitat. So we have one on the front end and the back end to take care of everybody. People who have the water can, and the people who don't can take advantage of it on the back
Right.
end. So that's why we're structured like that.
Right. Okay.
Chairman Blanchard,
Kevin.
yeah. Just to go back to whenever we made this motion and the potpourri, and we were trying to look to encompass, having the children whenever they were out in the areas that, the western part of the state, they were out, they would be able to hunt. So that's what it took in there. And we know in the western side of the state, we have earlier ducks. So it goes back to, I'm wondering, why did we change those zones? And And if I'm correct, we still have 3 years left in this system, the way we have set up, Jason, I believe? The way the zones are set up?
Yeah.
Okay, because
For-
that's
now,
something we
let me,
have to
let me
revisit.
clarify something. We have 2 zones and you can have up to 3 splits. You do not have to have, or 2 splits. You don't have to have 2 splits because if you recall the east zone, it's only 1 split still. It's the season that we've always proposed. So we proposed 2 splits and 3 segments. If the commission wanted to, we could have, I guess, 1 continuous 60 days, or you could have 1 split or 2 splits. So
Right.
we can still do that, but you're tied to the zone
The way
structure
the
that we are
zone is
now.
set up right now, you
Right.
tie.
You don't have to take it,
That's
you don't have to
something
take advantage of it, but you can. It allows you flexibility.
I understand what you're saying, but I guess the question is why, when the zones were changed, that was public comment or that was?
Right. It was overwhelming. Historically, people have always wanted later seasons, although our data tells us that the coastal
you-
zone get a lot of ducks earlier.
Right.
So it was the best of both worlds, and I'm borrowing Mr. Corville because I think he sold that to me. It's the best of both worlds that you can have an earlier season and a later season in the same season. So that's why that's why it was proposed and that's why the commission adopted that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is there any public comment on this or?
Set me up, I might as well come and say something. Chad Corville, 416 Pointer. I think Commissioner Segrera was getting at the original proposal, as I appreciate it, particularly for the kids that are in our area, they would be out of school and not able to hunt as it was originally proposed. And I think that was what inspired this revised date. And I think Commissioner Segrera hit it on the head too. If the folks in Southeast, which I can appreciate their issues, if they believe, my appreciation is they get a ringneck push that kind of moves through that country late season, that would be fine. But comparatively speaking, volumes of ducks in different regions, whatever. But I think when the time comes up where you have an opportunity to change zones, would be appropriate for those guys to come to this group, appeal to get those parishes included in the East Zone. You know, if we truly are trying to recruit young people into the sport, as we unfortunately saw this year in some of the different parishes, kids were out of school, didn't have the opportunity to go hunting. And that's disappointing. I think it was just an accidental oversight. I don't think there was any intent in that. And, but the intent in this revised dates is to ensure that the best of our ability, when kids are out of school, they have an opportunity to hunt. So I would really ask for your support in passing this as is, and then really spend a lot of time in advance of next duck season, which I think we can feel fairly confident that we're going to have 60 days grinding out the season dates and the structures so that we try and capture at a minimum when the kids are out of school, they have an opportunity to hunt. So thank you.
Chad, up one question. When the kids out of school, on the original dates that we have, the kids are gonna be out of school on those dates also.
But
You know,
my
I-
appreciation in our place, I don't think that's the case.
Because I know on the eastern side of the state, the kids are out of school, you know, on the original
I
date.
think
On
that
the
January
western-
date closing on a Tuesday, my appreciation is that it'll close and they'll still have another 5 or 6, 7 days to be out of school and the season would be closed. That's my appreciation of those original dates. And I'm sad to admit that I spent a fair amount of time looking at those
Right.
calendars whenever this new revised structure was proposed.
Well, being an avid duck hunter myself, you know, right there, with hunting on the eastern side, my children, as I raised them up, they were all ecstatic because when the opening of the season, they were out of school. And, you know, now, you know, with it opening on a Monday, you know, they'll be out of school and they're not gonna be able to go duck hunting.
Yeah, and
You know,
so.
right there. And I'm trying to make an intelligent decision, you know, based on the future of our kids, and the kids in our area look forward to that, and I guess they look forward to it on the western part of the state also, right there. And I'm sure that when the commission was putting these dates together originally, they had that in consideration of doing that, right there. So, myself, I'm kind of opposed to the potpourri because had I known the dates at the time, I would have probably argued this point when we went and did the amendment, right there. With it, and it's not, saying that you right or wrong, right there, and it'll be up to, commission to make that vote, in a few minutes, but, with that being said, the ducks always show up late on the outside, always, and I've been duck hunting since I'm a child, since, 45 years, and it's been the same thing over for 45 years. And if we could get duck season into February, it would even be better for us. So we give up our November, push it into February, but that's not allowable, right there.
If I could respond to the Monday opener, we've opened on a Monday for the last 2 years. So that part's not new. And so, I don't know what folks that are having concerns about a Monday opener are, but it's not uncharted territories. It's a symptom of the hunting segment.
Two splits, having two splits.
Yeah,
Is
so-
what it's symptom. And Chairman Blanchard, yeah, so.
Are y'all done?
And
Okay.
yeah, Vermillion Parish and all that, so you get off, their break is through they would be missing 5 days of hunting that they would be out of school, that they couldn't be hunting. And yes, with the two splits, we're gonna have not every day, we're not gonna be able to open on a Saturday all the way through on, with having two splits. So there's gonna be a Monday, there's gonna be some other odd opening that's not gonna be on a Saturday. As long as we have it set up where we have two splits.
Right.
If we change next year and go back to where we do one split and you have the 2 weeks off again, I mean, that may be something that's better. Which I kind of like that myself, but where we're sitting at right now, I don't think we can change that at this point.
Right.
So.
Well, right now we have, I guess, two choices, either to
Vote the amendment
vote-
in.
Vote to, as a potpourri is, or we just vote against.
And it
you
goes
know,
back to the original
potpourri,
proposed season.
And it goes back to original date of what the commission, what the staff has, presented to the commission. Right
Yep.
there.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the potpourri amendment to the notice of intent.
And then we got one motion. Anybody wants to second that? Okay, we got a second by Gene Reynolds. Okay. Joe,
Tommy, did I understand you to say if we don't do this, then we delay the process?
If you took any action other than yay or nay, you would delay the process. If you voted to accept the West Waterfowl Amendment, then that goes into the conditionally approved notice of intent, which we will take a vote after we vote on the potpourri. If you voted nay, you did not want to include it, it would go back to the original proposed season. Technically, you could produce another amendment. That's where we get muddy with our season structure with the feds, and then we've got to get hunting regulations and some dates out to our constituents. We have guides, we have outfitters, we have people planning their vacation. If we're not going to be, if we did another amendment, the earliest we would take another vote would be the August commission meeting. So we don't know if we would, we may take another amendment. So it would muddy the waters quite a bit if we didn't take action today.
But we could go back to the former proposal.
If you voted
and
not
delay.
to, yes, correct. If you voted no on the potpourri West Zone dates, it would go back to the original proposal that the department made in January that you conditionally adopted. That's correct. And then can I get some clarification, Commissioner Segarra? your motion is for the West Zone waterfowl dates because we have 3 potpourri amendments. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes,
I
West
wanted the
Zone.
public to be clarified.
Yes.
So we got first and a second right there, and Ms. Susan, I'll ask, maybe you do a roll call vote on, you get yea or nay on that motion.
Yes.
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 Right, well, the motion's gonna pass.
So thank you. I would like now ask you to vote favorably or not favorably on the deer tag and the turkey tag amendments that are also potpourris, please.
Right, we need a motion.
Are those together?
They're not together. Well, you could make them together if your motion made them together to accept both of those amendments, or you could do.
I would move that we adopt both, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we got a first by Mr. Joe, second by Gene Reynolds. And I'll ask for a vote on it. All in favor, state yea. Any opposition? No opposition, the motion's gonna pass.
Right. And so now I would ask for your favorable vote of the notice of intent as amended.
Okay. We need a motion on that, right? Okay, we got a motion by Brandon, second by, Kevin. All in favor, state aye. Aye. Any opposition? No opposition, it's done right there.
I like it. Thank y'all. Really appreciate y'all's involvement in this rulemaking process, and thank y'all for what y'all do. I know it's difficult.
All righty. Thank you for your presentation and getting it done. All right, next we hear, I can find my agenda. I think it's Peyton Cagle with setting of the shrimp season for the rest of the state. Consider the declaration for emergency to set the, not this one, that's it. Anyway, it's Peyton. Peyton, go ahead. I'll find my paper here soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members, and I will be performing this presentation with the assistance of Dr. Jack Isaacs. So he will be coming in, that way we can provide you with an abundance of information. So to the request of Commissioner McPherson, we will start with some recent data trends. I did try to keep this brief just to where I wasn't up here all day. So on the figure in front of you in orange, you have landings data. In the blue, you have value. These are Louisiana annual shrimp landings and value, all species combined whole weight. So it's clear to see that at the beginning of this 10-year time period, 2013 through 2018, over 90 million pounds every year. We did see a drop once we got into 2019 and have continued to see a decrease. We did rebound slightly in 2022 with landings with just over 80 million pounds. Value always fluctuates greatly, especially when you look at 2013, 2014. These are 2 major years that we had EMS impacting imported shrimp. So you can see when we had negative impacts on imported shrimp, domestic price went up. I do like to draw attention when you look at
Okay,
yes, sir.
one question, and I'm not sure if all the commissioners here know what EMS is.
Early mortality syndrome.
Okay,
Sorry.
I just wanted them to clarify.
Sorry. 2021, I do like to point out, when you look at that value, landings were low, but you see where that value is in relation to 2022. We had overall more landings in 2022, but less of a value. So that's going to come into play later when you can see it in greater detail. As we move, we look at annual brown shrimp landings and value. Again, a lot of fluctuation. You see that downward trend since 2019. Last big year was 2018 with 42 million pounds. Previously, 2013, 14, large landings. Also, you see that value of brown shrimp in 2014, extremely high. Again, negatively impacting imported shrimp, we saw positive benefits. And then we move over to white shrimp. Again, six years out of the 10 years, we're over 60 million pounds. They do fluctuate here and there, but we're pretty standard on these. You did see a decline in 2020, not so much in 2019, but 2020 we had COVID, we had multiple hurricanes, we had multiple hurricane threats. All of those impacted us. 2022, we actually had a large amount of white shrimp landed, 68 million pounds. Again, as I draw that point, when you look at 2022 landings compared to 2021, but you see that dockside value, 2021 dockside value was higher. So this is brown shrimp landings by count size. So at the bottom, you have your 0-10, your 11-15 count, all the way up to your over 100 count shrimp as you go to the right. The gray bar is 2020, the yellow bar is 2021, and the orange is 2022. That red line is the 10-year average. This gives you a comparison of the three most recent years compared to a longer term. And what you basically see is all 3 years of this time period, except a few mid ranges of those 31, 35, 36, 40 in 2020, we're below that 10-year average in landings by count size across the board. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier about 2022 standing out, here again, our gray is 2020, yellow 2021, blue is the 2022 value. So compared to 10 years. Almost all of 2020 and 2022 are below that 10-year average, but average price per pound for almost every count size of brown shrimp in 2021 exceeded the 10-year average. As we go to white shrimp, moving along, colors still represent the same years. Last year, as I mentioned, we rebounded with 68 million pounds. You can see that with the 1620s there. Over 14 million pounds, that's almost 5 million pounds more than the 10-year average. Again, 21, 25, 26, 30s also exceeding. Previous years, you do see that we were at or below that 10-year average for most of it, except in 2021, some of those smaller sizes where we did surpass that 10-year average. And again, pointing out that 2021, just something that stands out at you, every yellow line is above the 10-year average. But you look at the most current year, 2022 and 2020, all the price per pound are below the 10-year average. So this graph, I'll explain it to you. This is comparing a single year to the previous 5-year average. So if we take 2018, that means we're comparing 2018 to the average of years 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. If we go to 19, we're now comparing it to the average of 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. What this does is it allows you to compare a single year to a more recent trend of what's going on with the industry rather than comparing it to something 10 years ago. So as you can see in the first line here, the number of fishers reporting landings. So in 2018, compared to the previous 5 years, we saw an 18% decline in the number of fishers reporting landings. 2019, another decline by 20%. As we move over into 2022, we see 24% decline compared to the average of that previous 5 years. Landings fairly similar. You continue to see a decrease as we go by. As you saw with annual landings, 2020 was the lowest landings, and that's apparent here with negative 26%. And then catch per fisher actually has been increasing up until those 3 down years of 19, 20, and 21. And as of 2022, you see 26% increase. A lot of that was due to that 68 million pounds of white shrimp. We had less fishers, but they really landed a lot of white shrimp. So that's why you see that bump up there in 2022 for catch per fisher. Now we're going to move into some data that Dr. Isaacs will talk to you about.
Well, this is in response to a request that came from this August board at your last meeting. You asked us to look at per capita consumption of shrimp compared to other types of protein. And my colleague, Dr. Merriam, was in the back of the room and she came through like gangbusters. She did most of the heavy lifting on this and found just the right number. It turned out that there are a lot of numbers out there and she did some research and found just the proper one. I do want to talk about some of the differences in language and the different sources for some of these data. So when it comes to shrimp, the term we use is per capita consumption. And that is estimated by NOAA Fisheries, comes from the Fisheries of the United States, available online, a really valuable resource. If you ever get a chance to look at it, you learn a thing or two. And the data for the other, like the beef and the pork and whatnot, that came from the USDA. And the term that they use over there is per capita availability. Okay. And that's different because over at USDA, when they're talking about consumption, it involves a slightly different form, but we found just the right term. So Dr. Merriam found just the right term. So let's kind of go through here at the USDA, the NOAA Fisheries estimate of shrimp consumption. First of all, what it does, it expresses everything in pounds of meat. So you have a lot of different ways you can report seafood products, shrimp products. They convert everything into a common unit of measurement, okay? Then it's going to estimate the U.S. Shrimp calculations, okay? Consumption. It's going to do this, okay? 3 parts. U.S. landings, U.S. production, imports, and exports. So what it would do, for example, is U.S. landings were about 283 million pounds whole. They put that into like 124 million pounds of meat. Imports, a number that I report every year to the Shrimp Task Force meeting. That comes about 1.64 million pounds of breaded shrimp and shell-on shrimp and shrimp meat and all these other forms. And they convert that into about 158 million pounds of shrimp meat. And then they subtract out about 23.1 million pounds of exports, just a little bit. And you end up with shrimp consumption. So that shrimp consumption in 2020 was probably about 165 million pounds or so. And they take that number and they divide it by a population estimate as such and come up, first of all, that population estimate is U.S. civilian resident population. It's kind of a very specialized estimate of population. And when they do that, they come up with per capita consumption. Okay, we're going to see some estimates of that in the ensuing slides. USDA estimate of food availability. Remember, they do this in many different forms. The one we're going to use here is one that converts everything into pounds of meat. So it's going to be U.S. food availability of trimmed boneless meat for folks who want to know. Okay. They express everything into pounds of meat, and they calculate the commodity availability. Okay. Start off with those 3 same elements that we saw with seafood. Okay. U.S. production, you add in imports, you subtract out exports, and then you add in these 3 other little things. Okay. How much we had on hand at the beginning of the year, you add that in, you subtract out how much you had at the end of the year, and then you subtract out the use of certain commodities as imports. Now, this is probably a big thing in corn and wheat, right? Where those commodities are used as imports and feeding other little creatures that are considered output. Probably not a very important thing in terms of protein products like beef and chicken and pork. You don't really feed significant amount of that to other animals. You add all those 3 things together and you're going to come up with annual commodity availability. And you're going to divide that by population estimate for the U.S. And here it looks like the USDA is using the U.S. population overall. I couldn't quite figure out what population estimate they were using, but it's slightly different from what they had over there at NOAA Fisheries, I think. And you come up with an estimate of per capita availability in pounds of meat. And that's what we're going to see here in the next slide. Okay. The next slide, this is everything in pounds of meat, okay? Beef, about 55.4 pounds per person. Pork, about 49 pounds per person. Chicken, 68 pounds per person. Turkey, 12 pounds per person. Fish and shellfish of all sorts, including shrimp, about 19 pounds per person, and shrimp about 4.7 pounds per person. Now, that 4.7 pounds per person, probably going to be about 4.3 pounds of imports and about 0.4 pounds of US landings. Okay, per person. If you kind of want to get these things in terms of percentages, by the way, all those red meat products, the pork and the veal and the beef all added together, about 52% of all of the protein products that folks consume here in the US. And this is for 2019, the last year for which we had all the data together. Poultry, about 39%. The remaining 9.4% is fish and shellfish of all kinds, and probably about 25% of that, so say 2.3% of the overall protein availability in the US is represented by shrimp. Before I move on, any questions about that, gentlemen? Good, excellent. Well, thanks so much for your time. And I'll turn the floor over.
All right, thank you again. So now we're going to go into the two zones that are currently closed, Zone 1 and Zone 3, brown shrimp data. Those of you who are unfamiliar, Zone 1, that's the Mississippi-Louisiana state line to the Mississippi River. Zone 3 is freshwater bayou to the Texas-Louisiana border. So we'll start with Zone 1, work week 18. That is actual data that was collected this Monday. This is brown shrimp. This is the catch per unit effort. So the average number of brown shrimp per trawl of the 6-foot trawls. You can see in 2023, well above the long-term average. We're 121 catch per unit effort. The 10-year average there is 38. So the numbers look great when we look at catch per unit effort. But I will go and say that when you look at it and this is reflected here, Zone 1 as a whole, the numbers look good. But the southern portion of Zone 1 from the Mister goes south, that area is very fresh. We have seen very small numbers of brown shrimp. This last round of data that we collected, we did see an uptick in brown shrimp, but they were really small. So that small amount drove down average size for the entire zone. So because of that, we do not see the 50% crossover until you get to May 22nd. So by looking at that data, at the top left here, you have the actual data collected on Monday. This is size frequency. That's the percent of each count size of the total catch. What you see is a bunch of small shrimp. I mean, you do see some good shrimp already in 50, 60s, all the way to 100, 80, hundreds. But you see that 400 count, 600 count, all the way to 2,000 count. What we're doing is we're going to take that data to move to the top right. We're going to project that growth out for 1 week. And when you do that at the top right, you can see the shift. We got more shrimp in that 40, 50 range now, more shrimp at that 90, 110, 110, 130, and less shrimp in the 800s, more into the 400, 600 ranges. Bottom left, we're projecting that same data 2 weeks ahead. As you see that progression, you start seeing more 40, 50, 50, 60, 60, 70s, all the way to 80, hundreds, less 400 count, more into the 200. Same thing at the bottom right, 3 weeks of projection, which would be work week 22 or the week of May 22nd. And that would be what this cohort of shrimp collected, projected out would look. And that's when you get your crossover. As we go over to Zone 3, again, Zone 3, 16-foot trawl data. We do not do 6-foot trawls in Zone 3. These are lakes. They're not open marsh, broken marsh, so we don't utilize that small gear because we're not in interior marsh sampling. We're sampling on lake's edge, inside the lake, ship channels. What you see, though, overall for the combination of the Mermentau, Calcasieu, Sabine, catch per unit effort for brown shrimp is down. We are below the 10-year average. And what we did see is we had two samples. 95 to 99% of all commercial fishing in that zone 3 come out of Calcasieu. It's either Calcasieu Ship Channel or in the Gulf waters off Calcasieu. So two sample sites that were collected there in Calcasieu Lake were in the ship channel. That drove the data. The numbers of the shrimp that were there, the size of the shrimp there, and because of that, those samples in that, it pushed it to where when you look at that 50% threshold, you do get a crossover by May 15th. So 50% of that data for zone 3 would cross over by May 15th. And again, driven mainly by that samples collected in that major commercial shrimping area. So as we see here with the size frequency from that data, again, you see not a lot of shrimp that are over 100, a few 70, 80, 80, 100s, you know, 6%, 8% there, but more of your shrimp are in that 200 count up to 400 count. Top right, we're projecting it out 1 week. You do start seeing that movement into the 60, 70, 70, 80s. Still a lot of shrimp in 200s and 150 ranges. As we project out to 2 weeks ahead, which is your bottom left, you do start seeing the progression 40, 50, 50, 60, 60, 70, less shrimp in that 400 count. And that right there, that projected 2 weeks would be if we were to open May 15th. And I did put the last one in there just to where it looks similar to the last slide I showed you. If we projected out 3 weeks, even a larger percentage would cross that threshold. So based on the biological data, the recommendation would be to open all of zone 1 on May 22nd at 6 a.m. and then to open all of zone 3 May 15th at 6 a.m. And before I take questions, I would like to say that yesterday we did meet with the task force. We provided our recommendation to the task force, had discussions with them based on some of the data that we've discussed here, a few additional things. They did make a recommendation to open zones 1 and 3 together on May 18th at 6 a.m. So with that, I can take any questions.
Any questions? Kevin, anybody?
Does it,
Jim?
does it mean anything to y'all as biologists, the May 18th suggestion? I know we've had in the past, them talking about they don't want to run over here and then run back over here because of that week.
So biologically, as I had stated about zone 1, how the majority of that shrimp came out of that northern portion of zone 1, when the golden standard for brown shrimp is 6-foot data. So what is the 6-foot data? We're looking for overall abundance. We're looking for size. We're wanting to find the most shrimp that have recruited into the system. We're wanting to project that out. That way we take advantage of the most resource. So that's our gold standard. But because it's so fresh and we've seen so little shrimp in that southern portion of zone 1, the 16-foot data actually had some decent sized shrimp, not tons of it, but in the lower portions of that area, Lake Machai, areas like that going into Black Bay, we did have larger shrimp. So if we looked at the 16-foot data for that portion of zone 1 with the 6-foot data of northern portion of zone 1, it did have a crossover on the 18th. And that's what we had got through the discussion with the task force yesterday. Biologically, there would not be too much of a concern with that due to the fact of it's extremely fresh environment. It's not very suitable habitat for brown shrimp. The majority of the brown shrimp that you're going to see are going to be in those areas where the shrimp are going to project out already to be marketable. As far as zone 3, it already shows a crossover of the 15th. If you back that up a few days, there's no harm biologically of going later.
One question, Peyton. I know today's my second day seeing the presentation, right there. But what I wanted to allude to was on one of your slides. Well, it's actually on Jack's slide that he showed us, where the increase of 1620s, which is a large shrimp, And statistically, the fishermen always said, if we grow our product higher, we get more money for it. And on the report, it showed actually a decline in price on that. So it, with that being said, the importation of shrimp takes control of everything that we do, in there, because, we allow, 1.5 billion pounds of shrimp into the country, and we only use 4% of that that's domestic, right there. So it's a big, big concern. So it's up to us to try to target what is best, looking at the biological data and looking at the economic condition of the industry, and try to make the most intelligent decision that we can, as a group right here. And yes, the task force did agree on a May 18th opening statewide, and Zone 2 is already open right there. So the boats won't be concentrated. They'll be scattered throughout the whole state. So all we needed now is a motion to set the date.
Make the motion that that 1 and 3 open on, the 18th at 6 a.m.
A motion by Joe, I need a second by Gene Reynolds. All in favor of the May 18th statewide opening at 6 a.m. Reflecting, yay. Any opposition? No opposition. Motion passes. So May 18th is going to be the opening date statewide.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for the presentation. Next, we have receive a summary on the Red Drum Public Comment Survey, and Dr. Jack Isaac is going to present that to us.
Very good. Well, this was a effort on the part of a whole lot of folks. I have my name up there, but also Jason Adrians was a major contributor, Chris Shebley, Dr. Merriam. A lot of folks were a part of this effort, including about 5,000 Louisiana and even the non-Louisiana residents who took the time to give me the benefit of their perspective on this. So really was a group effort. Now, when it comes to red drum management, like any fishery, it's a really complicated issue, as you know, and there are a lot of elements going into it. And in one survey, we couldn't handle all of those elements, right? We had to kind of focus on them. So the ones we were kind of focused on were, what are the 3 or 4 management tools that we have in our little hit box? Minimum size, a slot limit, whether to have one or not, the width of the slot limit, whether you keep an oversized fish or don't keep an oversized fish, or whether that's a strict slot or whether it's a modified slot. Bag limits, also another effort, right? What are the kind of the combinations of those elements that folks seem to favor relatively more than others? So really the whole idea here wasn't necessarily to come up with a single correct answer, but to narrow the possible answers down. When this whole project came up, we had something like 24 or 28 different combinations of those things that we were looking at and saying, well, which one of these would the public like? Well, with this whole effort, I think we could probably narrow it down. So, what parameters folks are not willing to consider, and what parameters, might have a little bit more, a little bit less resistance. Okay, but what we're going to see is really no easy way to move forward with this issue, but I think these results are very telling. So this is a email and web-based survey. Okay, the survey was set up using an exterior website, SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey had things fixed that folks couldn't take the survey twice from the same machine. Now, some folks may take it 2 or 3 times, one from their work machine, one from their home machine, there's no way I really could prevent that. Okay. The email survey was sent to randomly selected Louisiana residents, only Louisiana residents, folks who had recreational licenses that gave them saltwater fishing privileges. So this is your resident saltwater fishers license, also your Sportsman's Paradise license, your senior license, all of these things coming together. We had about 11,000 of them, sent it out in the middle of February, had two reminders. It closed April the 12th, and we had about a 13% response rate. Response rates have just been going down over the past couple of years. And I was relatively satisfied with this one for a complicated survey of this nature. And then I think your email survey is probably more likely to get you something closer to your typical fisherman. Even your email respondents are probably going to be slightly more avid than your typical folks. But your web survey, the web survey was open on our website since February 24th. We're still collecting responses. Now, I only have the responses here analyzed through the 19th of April. Okay. We had 3,900 responses to this open survey. And these open survey, the web survey, you know, again, it was try to set up so that you couldn't have multiple people taking the survey from a single machine. But these folks are probably going to be a little bit more avid, a little bit more active than most of your typical fishermen. And it's actually kind of a neat natural experiment from my perspective, because you see your email survey, that kind of gives you a little bit of a better picture of what folks might think on average, might be a better depiction of like a fisherman overall. But your web survey kind of gives you a little bit more of insight into the thinking and the preferences of folks to whom this is really kind of a really important issue. Okay. And then, but none of this incidentally is going to give you a single answer, because what we're going to see, all of these things are going to depend upon the judgment of people in the public and different stakeholders and the fellows up here. So let's move forward. I do this slide here just to show you some initial evidence of what I was talking about, that difference in avidity, right? Look at your 63% of your email respondents had just your saltwater license, about 22% senior, small percentage had lifetime licenses. Look at your web survey. Oh, incidentally, these questions were I looked at this data in a slightly different way. From your email folks, you could only have one type of license. You don't want to know how, but I fixed that so you can only have one type of license. Your web survey, we asked folks, what license do you typically have? And some folks check more than one license. That way, if you add up these percentages, you're going to get a number greater than 100%. Okay. But this here, your lifetime licenses make up a third of your responses. People who claim that they had one, a third of them were lifetime licenses, and 13% had a sportsman's license. Now this means that these are folks who cared enough to spend more money for a license than your typical license. And also a lot of them folks who bought a license they'd have for the rest of their life. That seems to suggest a certain level of expected dedication to the activity. And also your web survey allowed charter boat guides to identify themselves and give responses. 9% of the responses were the charter boat guides. And this actually is really helpful to me, because later on in today's presentation, we're going to single out the charter boat guides and see what do they think versus to what folks who don't have that question. And I think that could just be helpful in understanding different sectors of the fishery. Okay. The folks who reported fishing by basin, okay, here you just go by percentage. This question actually was asked, we put up a map and said, which one of these zones do you fish in the most frequently? So people may actually fish in more than one of these zones, but this is the one that they fish in most frequently. So some differences here that I think are interesting. The email survey is kind of all over the place, but your web survey has a disproportionately large number of folks from east of the river. Okay, where from what I understand, the red drum population is of some more heightened concern, and your Terrebonne folks at 29% of your web survey respondents. Okay, just some basic statistics here, okay, folks who fished in freshwater, 84% of your email survey, 98% of your web survey. If you didn't fish in saltwater, I didn't ask you questions about red drum. I mean, your opinion is just how you have an opinion if you don't go saltwater fishing. Look at the differences in trips, okay? Your email survey, remember, kind of probably a better depiction of your average fisherman. Average about 11 trips, median is about 5. What this means actually, that your email survey, half or more of your respondents go out fewer than 5 times or fewer a year. Now look at that web survey. Right? So these are guys who are more active, more avid. Your average is about 29. Okay, that's dragged up a little bit by the presence of their charter boat guides in there, but not really as much as you might think. The median was 15 trips per year. So these folks are clearly more active. And then we asked folks, of those saltwater folks, what percentage fish for red drum? The percentages here between the two surveys, actually two survey collection methods, actually fairly close. 78% in one, about 80% in the other. And we asked the red drum questions about folks who said they fished for red drum. Okay, let's have a look at here. The number of red drum per typical trip, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see, some differences there in the middle, right, between your web and your email folks. But one thing that was interesting to me is Mr. Adrians gave us a presentation, I think at the last meeting or the one before that, where we went by our creel data and we said, okay, on a trips where we intercepted, what percentage had 1, 2, 3, 4 fish? And this thing here actually bears a certain resemblance to what we saw there. Now, I wasn't necessarily expecting that, okay? But we had this kind of a bimodal distribution. It's kind of a more of a Bactrian than a dromedary. For example, you have a 1 lump at 2 or 3 fish, and then another lump at 5 fish. Another thing that I thought was interesting is you don't really have these remarkable differences between your sectors, between how many fish they report catching on a typical trip, whatever that is. It's a subjective thing. There's really isn't a huge difference. In fact, the percentages who caught 5 fish maxed out are the same between these two samples. That was actually a curious finding to me. Okay, oversized red drum. Okay, how frequently do you catch them on a typical coastal fishing trip? Again, this is kind of a subjective thing. The distributions here between the two sectors actually kind of similar. Okay. I would say probably 65% of your email folks rarely or never catch a red drum, and looks like about 56% or so of your web survey folks say the same. Okay, a little bit higher of your web survey folks who said that they usually or always catch and retain oversized fish. Chris Sheevely, I corrected me on this when we were putting this draft together. This isn't just catch them, it's catch them and keep them. Okay, I think I anticipated Mr. Cressup's question. I saw him. Okay, excellent, very good. See, I've worked with him in the past. You start to read minds after a while. Levels of support for or opposition to the current regulations for the red drum. Here they are defined: 16 to 27-inch slot, creel limit or bag limit, 5 fish, including 1 over the creel. So this is a modified 1 over the maximum. So this is a modified slot limit. And what you see here, again, some differences. Your email survey, a higher percentage of folks who had strong levels of support. Your web survey had higher levels of folks who had some level of opposition to this. Okay, probably about 28, 29% of your web survey respondents opposed it to some degree versus say about 14 or 8 or 15% of your web survey. You do see a difference in unsure. As we go through this, we ask a lot of questions. You're going to see that a lot of your email respondents are probably a better depiction of your average fisherman out there, your average angler, really haven't made their minds up on this issue. Okay, there's some uncertainty, there's some kind of no preference. That's just a fact, I think, of the complication of this issue and maybe their lack of familiarity with it. But another thing I want to point out here is that both populations, about 60% of the folks support slightly or strongly the current regulations. 60% support it to one degree or another. That means that if the commission decides to move forward with changes in the regulations, there's going to be a lot of people cretching about this issue. Okay, just based on their preferences. Okay, there's some geographical differences here in the support level. So what I did here is what percentage of people who said that they fished in one of these zones gave a slightly or strongly supported the current regulations. You can see that the levels of support tend to be higher in Vermilion and Terrebonne and a little bit lower over there on the east side of the river. I think that was an interesting result. Now, I alluded to this earlier at the beginning of the regulation, the beginning of the presentation here today, okay? This is really kind of what we were trying to get at here. There are several different ways of managing a fishery, okay? Declining fishery in particular here. You can raise the minimum size standard. You can lower the bag limit. You can change the slot limit, okay? Incidentally, I didn't consider closing seasons because that's another option, but it was really kind of off the board here. It didn't really seem to be something that folks were willing to go ahead with. And so, but there are trade-offs with these type of things. So what we tried to do here to try to get our minds around this issue is just to explain the trade-off between management options and ask folks, okay, if you could, which one of these would you prefer? Or would you just have no preference? You don't really know. Okay. So the first of these, okay, is going to be minimum size limit and bag limit. So, well, kind of what this means, if you're going to achieve a certain percentage decrease in landings, you could go with options that have low minimum size and low bag limits to achieve that goal, or to achieve that same goal, you could go with a larger minimum size and larger bag limits. Okay. And what we saw here is that when it came to your web folks, okay, and your email folks, we could say that the preferred option or the favored combination maybe was that idea of the smaller minimum and smaller bag. But when I use that language preferred, it's almost a little bit leading, because preferred doesn't mean overwhelming support. It just means that of these two combinations, smaller minimum and smaller bag, larger minimum and larger bag, the smaller minimum, smaller bag thing had a higher level of support than the other. It's really what that is, okay? So 49% of your web folks preferred a smaller minimum, smaller bag combination. Your email folks, only about 32%, okay? Now, what I thought was interesting is it wasn't necessarily the levels of support for what I'm calling, perhaps inaccurately, the preferred combination. It's the level of support for the less preferred option. Between your two surveys, both of those, the percentages supporting the larger minimum, larger bags, actually fairly close, 25%, 20%. But look at the no preference. No preference. Okay, your email folks, 43%. We use a kind of plurality to use a technical term. Of your email folks don't have a preference on this. Maybe they haven't made their mind up. Maybe they don't have enough information. Okay, but still, there's a little bit of uncertainty. Remember, I kind of alluded to that. So on this issue, there's still a little bit of uncertainty when it comes to kind of your general angler. Some geographical variation here again. A stronger preference for the smaller minimum, smaller bag option east of the river than say and Terrebonne and Vermilion. Okay, these will be some interesting. I think that's interesting. Okay. There's another trade-off, okay, between the slot limit range and the bag limits. Okay, so it's the difference between the minimum size and the maximum size. Right now it's 11 inches, right, 16 and 27. You could go with, to achieve a given decline in landings, you could go with options that have a wide slot in the small bag or a narrow slot in a large bag. Going to go to those trade-offs. And here again, we see, to use that maybe slightly inaccurate term, the preferred option is the wider slot in the smaller bag. Okay. But even that option has a majority support for among your web survey folks, 36% support among your email folks. And again, in those email folks, again here, we actually see that the plurality, larger percentage than any other group, actually goes for the no preference. There's just still, there's some uncertainty on this. I don't know if folks don't understand the issue, if they really just don't have a preference one way or the other, it's just not important to them. I can't necessarily sush that out, but just kind of keep that in mind. There's a little bit of uncertainty on this issue. Again, the special effect came in a little bit later than it should. Again, there's also, especially among the web survey folks, some geographical variation. You also see that with the email folks. Again, east of the river, relatively high rates of support for the wider slot, smaller bag option. Okay, that's something to kind of keep in mind here. Okay, and now this is the one I think is actually probably a little clearer in terms of people's preferences. Okay, whether you keep an oversized fish or you don't. Okay, oh, my little bag here, this is supposed to be a bull red. Okay, economist humor. Okay, so what we see here is among your web survey results, a fairly strong majority of them, okay, 59% of your avid anglers represented by your web survey, avid and more active, 59% of them support not keeping an oversized fish, if that might mean a slightly bigger bag limit. Okay. Again, look at your non-preferred option. I thought this was really very, very interesting. The levels of support for keeping an oversized fish and having a smaller bag actually fairly similar between the two different sectors. Your active guys web survey and your less active guys the email survey. You also see that when it came to the email survey, a big drop in terms of the no preference here. Okay, it's down to about, well, it's actually not a big drop, it's at the 32% versus it was a higher 36%, even higher in other groups. So this, I think, is interesting. It suggests some willingness to accept giving up the oversized fish, but it's not universal. Okay, it's not universal. Even you're going into the oversized fish, you're going if you decide to move ahead with this, and it's your guys' choice, you are going to hear some folks complaining about that. Okay, you're going to hear folks complaining about everything. It's just what we're here for. Okay, called democracy. Okay, the differences here in the preferences for the larger bag and not keeping the oversized fish, that's actually higher in the western part of the state and the eastern part of the state, to kind of speak very, very broadly. Okay, about 70 supported among this in Vermilion. Now, the sample size, number of people responding for Vermilion was actually fairly small, so that may be something boosting this number up. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide here. This one also I thought was interesting. I did a correlation between, remember we asked that question earlier on, do you rarely or never keep oversized fish, or do you usually or always keep oversized fish? And here we see a result that I think is actually fairly consistent with what you would expect. Okay, folks who rarely or never keep oversized fish are more supporting of getting rid of that option than folks who said that they usually or always support. Okay, always catch an oversized fish and keep an oversized fish. But also I thought was interesting here is that among your avid active web respondents, a majority of them claim to support giving up the oversized fish if that means that they have a larger bag than they otherwise would. But for your average fisherman, your email respondent, only 39% support that option. Okay, now among the people who usually or always catch a fish, remember they're a minority of the respondents overall. All right, now here comes to this question where I have to say, we were putting this questionnaire together. We're a collective group, we're a very cooperative group, worked on consensus. I wasn't necessarily in love with this question, okay, but it helped out my manager, so I was really glad to include it in the survey. We had 24 different management options, 24 different combinations of minimum size and bag limits and slot limits and keeping an oversized fish or not keeping an oversized fish. But all of them were designed to do the same goal, reducing the landings by 35%. Okay. Now, this is almost kind of raising the question, well, do we want to lower the landing by 35% or not? That really wasn't what this question was about. This question is about, well, if we decide to lower landings by 35%, which one of these would be your most preferred? Okay. And we asked people to pick up to their top three. Now, small percentages gave 4 or 5, 2.5% of your email respondents, 5% of your web survey respondents. I'm sorry, I had to throw them out. They didn't answer the question the way they wanted to. But something like 48%, 49% of both groups gave only one option. You gave them a choice to answer up to only 3, but a big chunk gave only one. A majority gave only 1 or 2. Okay, but a big chunk gave only 1. Okay. And you see these these things really kind of all over the place. Okay. I'm going to make more sense of this in a future slide. Here they go, just for these are the 12 options that didn't allow keeping an oversized fish to try to keep the viewers in the audience today from being overwhelmed with numbers. I deleted the ones that have 5% or lower support. What we see here, among your web respondents, about 14% said that they would be willing to consider, I guess, a 17 to 20% bag limit, or I should say that was one of their 3 options with a bag limit of 5. About 11% or so of that same group said they'd be willing to live with a bag limit of 2 if they had a 16 to 21% slot. It's still only 11%. Okay. There appeared to be a little bit more support for not keeping an oversized, for one of these options that involved not keeping an oversized fish among your web respondents than among your email respondents than among your web respondents. So the email folks tended to give higher ratings to one of these options without an oversized fish than your web folks. These are the remaining 12. Okay, the remaining 12 here. These are options that did not allow people to keep an oversized fish. And we see, higher rates of approval here, kind of, generally speaking among these options, but that's only relative, right? The highest rated among these might have only 19% support. Okay, so there's not like any of these that really is attracting overwhelming love among the people who responded. Okay. And that's, I think, probably a result of having so many different choices to choose from. It's also a result of that we're asking folks here for a heavy sacrifice, 35% reduction in landings, right? I mean, if you were to move forward with that, that's just not something that everybody's going to fall in love with. Okay. Now, 35% might be required. That might be the thing that we need to do to solve the fishery. That wasn't the question here. We were asking folks, do you like this or do you don't? Okay. And we said just some high level of opposition to this. Okay. I think as all of us expected. This might actually help make a little more sense of this. Look at the characteristics. The top 3 options among your email survey respondents and the top 3 rated options among your web survey respondents. Even the top rated had only 18% or 19% support. And you can see that the 16 to 24, 16 to 22 option with no oversized fish appeared among the top 3 in both groups. I think that's kind of interesting right there. And then, your web survey folks also had, they liked that 17 to 20 option. The web and the email folks, 17 to 24, 17 to 20 also had some support. Low levels of support for options like these. One thing that I think that really kind of unites these would be low bag limits. or high minimum size. Okay, so high minimum size limits, I think, is not attractive to a lot of folks. Okay, now there are many, many different stakeholders in the fishery. And I had data that allowed me to examine patterns and responses among one particular sector of our respondents, the charter boat captains. And I compared those to respondents who didn't have a charter boat license. Okay, so these were mutually exclusive groups. They also only came from the web survey because remember the email survey was aimed at people who had recreational licenses. Now I'm sure that random sample included some people who had charter boat licenses. You know, there are a couple thousand of them out there. You're likely to get one in a sample of 10,000 people. But we didn't ask if they had a charter boat license, so I couldn't do this for the email survey. But for the web survey, I was able to do it. So what you see here is some really interesting differences between your charter captains and what I'm going to call your private anglers. Okay, 51% support for the current regulations. Okay, among your private anglers, 57% support among your private anglers. So there's a difference in support, lower levels of support among your charter boat captains for the current regulations. Higher levels of support for the charter boat captains for the smaller minimum size and smaller bag option than among your private anglers. Higher levels of support for the wide slot small bag limit among your charter boat captains. And that small bag thing appears to be kind of a common element there. And also the keeping the oversized fish. There's a difference, but they're fairly close here, 62%, 59% for the two of these. And let's look here at your top three options among your charter boat captains versus your private anglers. I think this is really interesting. Your pattern of responses for your private anglers here, the top three, fairly similar to what we saw earlier for your web respondents overall, but look at your charter boat captains, right? They tend to favor wider slots and smaller bag limits. Okay. So make of that what you will, okay? The least frequently cited options here, just for compare and contrast, I think you might want to see those, okay? All right, so that kind of gets us done with the quantitative part of the survey, and I'm almost done here. You probably had enough of me already. I'm just about to finish up, okay? I went through the written comments. Now, I started going through the written comments sometime late last week, just with the idea I wanted to go through and remove personal names, because some people would say, oh, my name is Jack Isaacs, here's my email address. I wanted to delete all of those. Also, some people might say, oh, I fish out of Happy Jack Marina. Well, you know, we were a public document here. I don't want to include any private businesses like that because it could seem like we're trying to endorse them or something. So I went through to kind of be name withheld there. I didn't want to do that. Also, folks used, how shall I say, colorful metaphors. Okay. And I thought I should go through the document and remove those. Not out of personal offense. Look, I played in a rugby team. I was in the fraternity. I've heard just about every variation on those words. But I'm thinking, you know, that the Sunday school teacher in Simsport reading through a public document, I don't want to offend him. I don't want to offend her. So I went through and took those out. And you haven't lived really until you've done a word search for on a document and taken them all out. But going through this process, I noticed certain themes coming up again and again and again. Now, remember, I said that our survey here couldn't focus on all of the issues that affect the fishery. And sometimes respondents would bring me to task for that. Oh, you didn't mention this, you didn't mention that. Well, we couldn't mention everything in the survey. The survey was already too long. We couldn't include everything. But the open responses here gave some people an idea of a chance, to sound off. Bow fishing. Bow fishing, we had 5,000 respondents overall. I think we had over 800 responses where somebody said something about bow fishing. And 700 of those, more than 700 of those, came from the web survey. Okay, so your web survey, you had 3,900 responses, about 18% just out of the blue mentioned bow fishing. Make of that what you will. Okay. Charter boat operations also had a lot of comments. Most of them, with my apologies to the gentleman here, are somewhat critical. Okay. Now remember, this is just people's opinions. Just people's opinions, not my opinion, not the department's opinion, not the commission's opinion. It's just your respondents' opinions. And their opinions not necessarily, it may not be very accurate. Okay, it may just be a misperception, the type of things, but it's their opinions. And then commercial fishing, particularly the pokey boats. Got a lot of comment. Now, I can't say how much of an impact the pokey boat operations are having on the fishery or not, but a lot of people are of the opinion that they're having a negative effect. Okay, that's, again, it's just their opinion. I don't know whether their opinions are right or wrong. It's just their opinions. Other things too would be environmental factors influencing the fishery. Folks brought up, I think, sagely, that a lot of things affect the productivity of this fishery, not just recreational activities, freshwater diversions, loss of habitat, deterioration of the marsh, all those sort of things. That's a whole category there. Fisheries management options. People had different opinions on size limits and bag limits and keeping oversized fish and not, and whatnot, regulations and monitoring, if you're going to have these regulations, enforce them, that sort of thing. Research and resource management. A lot of the folks very critical of the questionnaire itself. Oh, they really knocked me a tea kettle on that, I tell you. It's part of my job. Part of my job. I took it all. So one thing to keep in mind, I went through and categorized these for the benefit of the commission. 158 pages worth of comments. Some of those comments are duplicates because, they may mention in the same sentence, bow fishing and pokey boats. That would show up under two different categories. Okay. Some of them I divided into different categories. The categorization, incidentally, totally subjective. Okay. Just kind of when I write a comment, what box I would put it in at that time. If I have a comment and I have it under one category and you should think it should be in another category, keep your opinion to yourself. I don't want it. Okay. Okay. Let's go through a summary of this thing right here. Okay. Majority of anglers supported the current size, or maybe they should say the current slot, and the bag limits. Okay. Something like it's 60%, 59% supported it to one degree or another. The management trade-off between size limit and bag limit. Your web survey shows a larger share, not necessarily a majority, but a larger share preferred the smaller minimum size and smaller bag limit to the opposite, larger minimum size, larger bag. Web survey, really many are not decided on this trade-off. Maybe the trade-off was too much for them to consider. Maybe they only go, 4 or 5 times a year. They really don't know how to make sense of it. There's a lot of no preference there among your email survey respondents overall. The same for the slot range limit and the bag range limit, okay? The web survey, a larger share preferred a wider slot and smaller bag to the opposite. Your email survey respondents, actually, they had a lot of folks who went that way too, but a lot of your email survey folks had no preference. They're really kind of made up on this. Their minds are not made up on this issue entirely. And then the trade-off between the oversized fish, keeping an oversized fish and a bag limit. The largest groups of both your email and your web survey folks seem to support that option, okay, but it wasn't universal. Okay, so it isn't like everybody is out there saying yes, get rid of the oversized fish. There are a lot of folks out there who are in favor of it, but there are probably 25% of the folks who like being able to keep the oversized fish. Okay. Also, things here we asked folks to consider 24 different options for managing the fisheries, combination between minimum size, different minimum sizes and slot limits and the like. No single one of these achieved high levels of support. They kind of maxed out at about just under 20% for any single one of them. But there were some things too that I can think if we look at the top 3 options, can help us narrow down where we might want to consider if we have to make changes with this. And remember, that really was one of the whole things that we wanted to do with this survey. We didn't go into this survey saying, oh, we're going to come up with the single best response to everything. Now we've solved the entire problem. So the whole idea really behind this was to try to narrow the range of uncertainty a little bit. And I think it's actually very useful for that. So if you looked at your options, okay, your top three options between two different groups, but these two different surveys, two of them featured a a 5-fish bag limit, and one a 3-fish bag limit. Okay, none of the top three a 2 or a 1-fish bag limit. Okay, two of the top three featured a 16-inch minimum, and one a 17-inch minimum. Okay. So what this kind of suggests to me is that, you know, folks are probably a little reluctant to give up significant changes in the minimum size limit. Okay. The maximum size limits, 20 to 24 inches. Okay. Now, what I gather out of that, if I had to say, is that folks might be a little more willing to give up inches on the upper end of that maximum. Okay, maybe an inch or so at the lower end, maybe 2, 3 inches, 4 inches at the upper range. Okay, maximum. So, and then most of the favored options banned keeping oversized fish. No oversized fish. Okay, and a lot of written comments also on that issue. But again, that's not universal. And that big, long survey took a whole lot of your time. Any questions? Good. I must have really, I was super, I answered all your questions, or you're totally bored. I don't know which. But at this time, I think we might want to invite Mr. Adrians up.
Let me ask one question.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dr. Isaac, most of this I don't fully understand, as you would expect, but it seems like, would it be fair to say that respondents seem to want to preserve what their fishing success was? In other words, you had a majority of people that didn't catch oversized red drum.
Right.
And so they seem to be more in favor of wanting to go and catch fish, so they want to preserve the smaller size.
I think that's a cogent observation, that folks' preferences tend to be similar to what they're catching. I think that is pretty keen observation.
They don't want to give up anything.
They might be reluctant to give something up. Okay.
Any other questions? Jack, it's a great presentation right there. I know y'all had to take some time in doing that.
That I did.
Right there. And we do have some public comments also.
Oh.
Jason, you want to come up and give your thoughts on it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And certainly if you want to take public comment first, I was simply going to ask for any guidance that the commission wanted to provide us in terms of, would you like to see a notice of intent in the next meeting or two, or how you'd like to proceed now that we've had this done? So if after public comment or at some point, you'd like to give us a little idea of where to go forward, that'd be great.
Go ahead, Jay.
Jason, I would ask this question, if I understood Dr. Isaacs, that there's no clear preference between the respondents, what would be your suggestion on developing an NOI?
I probably couldn't tell you that yet. I think we look at those top things that people indicated, at least in this, even though there's not a clear one, but look at those that fell out more towards the top and bring something along those lines. But obviously you as a commission could look at what we bring and then modify that.
The options that they were allowed to choose from, did they all achieve the target?
Correct. Those were all options that achieved that 35% reduction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jason, one more thing. I don't, and I know Dr. Isaac, in all the comments, I guess.
Yes, sir.
I mean, they had like 58 pages, maybe even more than that. I couldn't read them all,
Right.
right there. But it looks like on every page, someone commented about bow fishing,
What was, sir?
about bow fishing.
Oh, yeah. I think there were, of the 158 pages, if I had to guess, I'd say probably 35 pages or so, maybe 40 pages just on bow fishing.
Right.
Yeah, a whole lot of comments about that.
Yeah, that's what I It was more than I wanted to read right there, but.
I need that.
Okay.
Jason, do we know what bow fishing, contributes to the take?
We can do some back of the envelope, but honestly, that's a fishery that in terms of data and its impact in terms of harvest, it's hard to gauge. It occurs mostly at night, so we can look at our nighttime effort because we do have that data of the percentage of trips that occur at night. And then we can make an assumption that those catch rates are the same as the daytime, and we could probably get a number from that. But we're looking at some things moving forward to better quantify that nighttime catch rate, maybe through a pilot project at a basin or two, see if those catch rates at night differ, and then if private dock catch rates differ, if we can get that going, that'll give us an idea if the catch rates we see during the day right now, are those similar to what we're seeing or not?
Well, it seems like we need that even if we have to guesstimate it, I think is what you were saying. In hindsight, with the focus on bow fishing that we seem to have, yeah, maybe we could have included some of that in our survey to try to get some numbers.
Yeah, I guess we could have, but we obviously got a lot of comments on that, and we were looking particularly at management changes. And of course, that form of fishing would be subject to the new regulations as well. But that's always a possibility for further exploration. And just as a side note too, to remind the commission, unfortunately, you all have no control over that as a gear. That's a legislative issue in terms of whether that gear is legal or not for red drum.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and start. We got some public that wants to speak, and Dr. Jack Isaac, you might have some question, but Ty Hibbs, is he still here? Come and state your name and address, please.
How you doing? I'm Ty Hibbs. I'm a charter guide down Plaquemines in St. Bernard Parish. I focus on redfish year round and have been for the past 10 years. Address 2413 Mallard Street, Slidell. I just wanted to start by saying, I really appreciate all the work that the biologists have done on this project with the stock assessment, with, the survey and all. And I don't know, they get criticized for everything, and y'all do as well. And y'all have done great in the conservation as of late. And I just wish, people would appreciate the validity of these studies done a lot more. But the one thing I wanted to say about the survey was it pretty much focused around that 35% reduction. And that's what we saw with it. I'd like to see a little bit more. I really wish we could see near that 50% reduction, just because, based on the stock assessments and the numbers done, if you're looking at a 30% reduction, you're failing to rebuild a fishery by 2060. It's a long way away from now. A 40% reduction, you're looking at 2040. And then a 50% reduction is more like 2034, within the 10 years that we have now, 11 years. I think it's just hard to imagine what's going to happen in the next 30 years. We can do so much from a management. Just so many things outside of that will change as well. And I think majority of people would agree they'd like to see something done sooner than later. Even if we have to give a little on the front end, I think that can be maybe something in a future survey that would be cool to include. Also, I just wanted to say, I don't know if y'all are aware, but redfish here in Louisiana is probably one of the most popular things around right now, especially the last 10 years. They're definitely, I'd have to say they're probably the most important fish to the state of Louisiana in our marsh right now. I think they bring in more tourists. They bring in more just money, dollar bill amounts from all over the world. I have clients that fly in from England, from Australia, from, all over the planet to come catch a redfish, and I just think, especially over the last 10 years, there's so much against the redfish, when really it really does. Our redfish has to be one of the most popular things down here as far as Louisiana. I myself don't kill any redfish anymore. I don't allow it. I never have a client complain. Everybody just that I bring appreciates this fishery. They appreciate coming to catch any redfish, whether it's small or large. I never have allowed a client to kill a bull red. Even when I started this, even when I was a kid, you never really kept a bull red. For one, I don't know, maybe it's a taste thing. I've eaten very few of them, never really liked them. But two, as far as just thinking about what it does for our fishery, a bull red is so valuable to our fishery. They grow very old. They could spawn many times. I don't believe that we should just kill that fish just to kill it or for whatever it may be. I just think it's something that we can definitely give up. And, I just wanted to say, I really appreciate everything that has gone into this. I know it's a lot of work. It's pretty incredible to see all the results of the survey. I'm really happy to see it. I think the people of Louisiana are a lot more conservation minded than what people have thought over the past years, especially now. And I think we're seeing that. We saw that with the survey. And, this place has been the redfish capital of the world forever. I don't really ever want to see a day where it became less than that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and I agree with you on the redfish, that we got the best fishery in the whole world on redfish. Next, we have Dave Best.
How y'all doing? Dave Best, address 2 Grand Canyon Drive. That's in New Orleans. Not to sound like a broken record, but I as well, I'm a fly fishing guide who basically, we practice catch and release. Very few fish have ever been killed on my boat as well. Just as Ty, Ty and I are friends. So something we're very passionate about. And I do agree that it seemed that the survey that I agonized over taking for several weeks, because you look at it and it was like, there's not great options to get you to anything other than like a 35% reduction, whether it was, taking a few less fish. I think most people are in favor of not taking a oversized fish, because you look at the krill surveys and you see the numbers are just down over the years, over and over and over, just go down, 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 down. And I think some people who are undecided are like, well, I don't really know what to pick, because they're like, I don't know how this really affects me in one way or the other. And I think some people who don't respond to a survey, who've seen the can get kicked down the road year after year after year after year. You tell them, your biologist tells them, hey, we need to change this stuff. They make recommendations. It goes to the house and they say, nope, we don't like that. Let's knock it down. It's going to go back. So, we've become very passionate about this. I look at how many days a year I fish. And I don't want to look at many, because you look at anyway, you see how many days you fish. And then you look at the amount of fish you're able to catch, especially what we do. It's a little different than, fishing with a popping cork and shrimp. Like, we're actually putting our eyes on every fish we catch. So it's a whole different ball game. I can give you a lot of information about the bow fishing. If somebody was curious talking to me about that, I can give you a lot of information about that, how it affects the fishery here. I'll be glad to talk to you as long as you want to talk, however many people want to talk to me. So, I have an idea of what most of those comments probably said. So, but very appreciative of the biologists who have taken a lot of time to put the survey together. Very glad that it shows that most people are in favor of not taking a fish that is, over 27 inches. I've never understood, if we say the top of the slide is 27 inches, why one over 27 was we're ever able to take one of those anyway. So, but yeah, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to get to share that with you, to take off work. Day off work today is a sacrifice, making money to come and make a statement here. So it cost me a day's pay to come do this. So I want you to know that I'm willing to do that, and whatever it takes to make a difference. That's what I'm here for. Thank you.
All right. Any questions? Thank you. Next, we have Craig Gautreaux. Okay.
Yep. My public comment is not germane to any of the agenda items. So if y'all want to.
All right, it goes in public comments, all right. Well, next on the redfish is Richard Fisher.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Great to see you all again. Richard Fisher, Executive Director of the Louisiana Charter Boat Association, Meadowdale Street in Metairie. Thank you all for taking up this important topic and talking about it with some haste. You know, we only started talking about this a few months ago, so we appreciate the quickness that y'all have in doing something on the redfish situation. Want to thank Ty for being here. You're a great voice for our industry. Thank you. And Dave, look forward to meeting you after the meeting. Thank you all for those comments. I'd like to give you all a brief rundown of the survey that I've done, which is a little bit adjacent to Dr. Isaac's survey, and great presentation, by the way. That was very well explained and very easy to digest for us non-statistical types here. So thank you. As for our survey, so this was just for Louisiana charter captains, of course. We found that 82% are in favor of either banning or greatly reducing bull reds. So that tells us that even more so than Dr. Isaac's survey, there is a strong proponent, strong individuals being in favor of getting rid of banning bull reds and killing those fish there. So that's definitely something that our sector has repeatedly shown that we would be in favor of. What was a little bit slightly different from Dr. Isaac's results that we had in our results is that we had 59% in favor of going to 4, but not necessarily going to 3. Going to 3 had more opposition than being in favor. So what we found was that so far in our survey, at least, there was a little bit more people being in favor of keeping the bag limit a little bit higher and maybe reducing the size limit maybe a little bit more. What we did agree with Dr. Isaac's survey, though, and what we found was that there was a little bit more interest in getting rid of inches at the top of the slot limit than the bottom of the slot limit. Among the plethora of choices, I think I made the joke with you last week that the slices of the pizza are a little bit too small. You're going to be hungry after, because we had 24 choices on there. The one that kind of jived between our two surveys was doing 3 fish. And I know I just said they prefer 4 over 3, but this was one of the most popular options that we found. It was going to 3 fish, slot limit 16 to 24, 0 over the slot limit. The other 2 most popular options that we found, which looked like they came in maybe 4th or 5th or 5th and 6th in you guys' polling, would be 4, 18 to 27, 0 over, 5, 18 to 26, and 0 over. So it wasn't a great deal different in respect there. It was just, you know, maybe 2nd and 3rd place in our poll and 5th and 6th place in their poll. I think based off of what we've seen shared in our polls is that there's a great interest out there to get rid of bull reds. And I think scientifically we can see the validity and why that would be so important. So my respectful request to the commission would be for us to consider it a notice of intent. Let's just ban bull reds now. Like at the next meeting, let's have a notice of intent to say, let's start and make it clear this is not the be all and end all step, but this is the first step to ban bull red harvest. And then over the course of the next few months, we can kind of work out, do we want to take off an inch there, an inch here, a fish there, and how we want to work out those little side details. But I would like to make that request. And before I go, I'd like please indulge me for a second. I want to give Colonel Abear and his team immense credit for the bust they had on Toledo Bend getting those illegal charters. Great job. We love seeing that. And that's all I got. If y'all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, been sitting here absorbing all the information. 60% of the respondents are happy with the way things are right now, right? Okay, here's my point. This commission has demonstrated in the past that we will follow the biology.
Right.
But there's some guys down the road that don't necessarily do that. Speckled trout. So if we go to all the trouble to try to do something, we need your support when that committee meets over there and tell them what you're telling us, because you know they can overrule us and have in the past.
Yes, sir. And I'm glad you brought up the polling difference. That is something that I forgot to mention. So our
Right.
polling, which was different than their polling, showed that there is a strong want to have a change on redfish, which was not shown in that poll. I don't know what the reasons for that might be,
Election
but
year. I can give you the reason. It's election year. You know, bring it up again in February, we might do a little bit better. But that's, you know, that's very frustrating when we go and we stick with the science. The guys out here work and get all that information and put it there, and then bam, you know, it's overruled. So, but that's the way it is. So anyway, we need you in that committee. If we do something with redfish, we need you in that committee testifying.
yes, sir. And
Okay.
depending on what that something is, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay,
Yes,
good.
sir.
Any other questions? Thank you, Richard.
Thank you all very much.
All right, next we have David Croissant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon now, isn't it? Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good to be with you. David Cresson from the Coastal Conservation Association of Louisiana. And I'll be brief. I just want to echo what my friend Richard just said, that we also, as an association, support no longer killing bull reds, and would support that if this commission chose to go that path. But I would also add, I had a conversation with Mr. Banks a couple of weeks ago, kind of a casual conversation about bow fishing. And it became clear to me in that brief conversation that we just don't have very good data on that sector of the fishery. And I sort of put out there for consideration whether we should consider something like what we do with the offshore landing permit for bow fishermen. Not necessarily cost anything extra, but just so that we could start to understand the universe of people doing this. Because I think part of the problem is we just don't have a good idea of how many are doing it. And with that in mind, it's hard to know how many fish they're actually killing or what damage they're really doing. But there has been some talk about potentially a new license for them, but I recognize that that might complicate the new license system that has been put in place. The other thought might be on bow fishing, perhaps add some questions to the Creel survey done over the phone or online. Again, it's hard to intercept these trips at night. I'm just putting these out there as potential ways that we could learn more about bow fishing, because like Dr. Isaacs, I get a lot of comments about that too. And I think we need to learn a lot more about it. So we certainly will support the removal of the bull red harvest, and are open to options as far as other changes to the recreational harvest. So thank you so much.
Any questions? Joe?
I'm gonna try to make this quick, but years ago, there was a spearfishing regulation passed to allow spearfishing south of the highway across Toledo Bend on the Louisiana side. And it was very controversial. All the boat fishermen didn't like it, and they studied it, and they actually got the biologist. Patrick, you probably don't remember that, being a oysterman, but they actually got the biologist certified to dive, and they checked, and what they found was all fishermen are liars. When they said they got more than they did, but when they did their creel checks and when they actually went down to see how many they can, it was almost unbelievable that they got almost the same number of bow fishing as they did with fishing out of boats. There was no difference, and it kind of goes back to what you said, Randy. The deer don't care if he dies, whether he's killed in front of a dog or not. You know, the same thing with a redfish. You know, it's how many you take out, and something Jason said made sense is when you reduce it, you're probably going to be reducing it I doubt that bow fishermen are taking that many more fish and they're still having to stay within the limit. So then you're getting into what's a preference, and you don't want one user group dictating to another user group that has just as much right to the resource as anyone else.
That's right. One other thing too, sir, that you may notice when you go through the written comments, if you have an opportunity to wade through 40 pages of them, you'll see that a lot of people were of the opinion, and I repeat, this is of the opinion, not based on science or anything, that a lot of the bow fishermen may be harvesting undersized fish. So there's an issue there of ethics. If a fellow goes out with a charter boat captain and catches an undersized fish, he can chuck that fish back in the water. It's going to be okay. Private angler goes out, catches a 15-inch fish. She can return that to the water and it'll live for another day. Bow fisherman catches that 15-inch fish. Oops. Actually, that was the exact wording that one of the guys in the survey had was oops. I like that. So I'm kind of quoting that. If you have any questions, any more questions for me? Thank you very much.
Just great presentation, Jack. All right. From this commission, Mr. Joseph.
Chairman, I know that, they asked for some guidance here, so, I mean, my thoughts are, we just got this information, we kind of digest this, we get the information that you already have on getting to the 35% or even higher percent gets sent back to the commissioners where we can review it and then come back in next meeting and say, look, this is a notice of intent we feel we need to go with and go from there. That's my opinion.
I agree with you. We need to ask the department to research what Jack has and other research and come up with an NOI to present to the commission for consideration, I think.
Well, I think, yeah, that would be fine.
That would be fine. So, and I don't think we need that in a form of a motion or anything other than Patrick's gonna have his work cut out for him to get it to us there from possibly next month for the meeting.
I'll just say that it may be July rather than June, just depending on when we can get all the information together and put together the economic impact statement and, those things.
You gonna try to include the bow fishing in that?
Well, we're going to evaluate that. I know there's a lot of concern over bow fishing, but from a number standpoint, something that Commissioner McPherson said is a good point. We have to try to evaluate what level of impact is it having on the species. And Mr. Cresson mentioned one of the concerns we have is we really don't have a good measure of effort for that segment of the fishery. And so we do need to try to consider whether we need a special endorsement or permit to try to identify some of that effort. But in terms of numbers, I don't know that it's having any more of an impact in terms of numbers of fish taken out of the water than anything else. We can argue whether it has an impact on rest for the fish or whatever during the nighttime, but so I don't know that we're going to include necessarily bow fishing, but we're going to look at it and try to see if there's information out there that would lead us down that path.
Right. I know the youth people in the state, I say the youth, the young adults in the state, they don't want us driving the bow fishing. Most of us don't want to get up and go fight the gnats and the mosquitoes right there, but them young guys, they're just willing to go and fight whatever they can to go and see if they can spear a fish right there. So just look at it.
They could come to North Louisiana, we could fix them up with silver carp.
Yeah, you're right about that. So, all right, moving on. If there's no more other questions on redfish, we're gonna ask for public comment. And I do have one person with public comment, Craig Gotro.
Hi, I'm Craig Gotro with NOAA Fisheries. I currently work in the Habitat Conservation Division of the Southeast Regional Office, but I'm doing a temporary detail with the aquaculture section. And it's in that capacity that I'm coming to speak to you today. Recently, this week, NOAA Fisheries released a public scoping summary for the process of identifying aquaculture opportunity areas in the Gulf of Mexico. And so there was a whole process where the atlas was developed and identified 9 sites across the Gulf, 3 off of Texas, 3 off of Florida, and 3 off of Louisiana. And so this public scoping summary is just a conglomeration and summary of all the public comments that came throughout the process of 3 public meetings. And so just want to make y'all aware of that. And if y'all have any questions, I'm happy to take that.
I have one.
Sure.
What type of aquaculture y'all planning on?
So this is offshore aquaculture, and so it's open to the AOAs that are basically just sites that could accommodate multiple farms. And so it's not any specific farms. There's currently only 1 farm that is actively moving forward to permit, and they're off of Pensacola. And it's a restaurateur where a lady's wanting to grow red drum to supply her restaurant. However, if you looked at, red drum is available in restaurants nowadays and a lot of seafood markets, and that's predominantly coming from pond-raised redfish from Texas. They have the capacity to produce up to 8 million pounds a year.
Right.
So right now, Louisiana is not producing any saltwater fish.
Right. So with aquaculture opportunity right there, it could open up the doors for speckled trout, redfish, tuna, sword, whatever, because it's being done in other parts of the world right now.
Correct. Any individual farm would still have to go through the permitting process. And there's as you know, in the United States, we have a lot of environmental regulatory safeguards to monitor. So EPA and Army Corps of Engineers are both involved in permitting of these projects, and EPA is looking at the nutrient discharge. And so each individual species that's being modeled, the number of cages, that's all goes into the equation. But the opportunities are open. It's just the willingness of individuals and businesses to take these challenges on. But it is a way to combat the imported seafood and provide U.S. produced seafood.
Correct. And I guess the aquaculture, to set the nets or whatever, or they're planning on working with energy companies on platforms that's dead in the Gulf, or?
So that there is one individual met at a conference earlier this year that's looking at co-locating it with oil and gas platforms. Currently, there's no, the wind industry has its own set of hurdles in getting established. All these AOAs are in deeper water, a minimum of 60 meters, so that in the event of a hurricane, it could be submerged beneath the wave action. So they're pretty far offshore, except for one site. I think it's C13. That's it's the closest one to shore. It's just south of the mouth of the river, kind of in between South and Southwest Pass. But it needs to be in deep water, but it would still need to be serviced by vessels and marine folks from the state that they're in.
Right. Now, and I'm just throwing this out there, because I've heard about this and, with they're planning on processing the product out there at the foreign, instead of bringing a product inshore, or are they planning on selling it as fresh once it's harvested, or do you know?
I think that's up to the purview of the farm. Like perhaps this person that's talking about co-locating with the oil and gas platform, they could do some of that processing out there. Most of the time it's harvested, and if anything, it would just be gutted and it would be sold as a whole fish. It's a lot easier to transport it as a whole fish. Basically swimming the same day it gets shipped out.
All right. I think, any other questions?
Yeah, if anyone's interested in it, you just search for Gulf AOA.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. All right, any other public comment? If not, it's been a long meeting. I'll ask for adjournment. Got a motion by Joe, second by Gene. All in favor, state aye. Thank everyone for coming, and